Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 5 of 40k Fight Club. This week's episode is called Towering Inferno, and we are going to be covering the week of events from the 26th and 27th of February. We are recording now. It is Wednesday, 2 a.m., the 2nd of March at midnight. Thank you for everybody who's joining us live. Thank you to everybody who's joining us on the podcast feed. We love and appreciate every single one of you. I cannot believe personally that we've made it to 5 episodes already. It feels like we've just started. The amount of work we've done behind the scenes feels like we're basically doing it for the fun of it and getting to do it for 5 episodes now. Part of the firmament now. We've been doing this for ages. You got to listen to us. How do you guys feel about making it to the big episode 5?
Feels pretty good, honestly. The support that we have is massive. It really does not feel like we're doing like this being episode 5 for the amount of work that goes into it is crazy.
Well, we're
Especially
not the ones doing the stats, so
yeah,
we can take that. I'm sure Nathan and Cliff have done a lot more work than we
yeah,
have.
they've definitely done a lot more work than us. We go to events, play, and then we come back and we go, I don't know, man, this looks crazy. But they're really doing the legwork on the hard math stuff. So thank you to the boys with the numbers.
How you feel about it, Nathan? 5
we do
episodes?
we do our best, but I do really like recording this show, and so I'm very happy that we've made it to 5. It feels like we've broken past that everybody who makes a podcast only lasts 3 episodes kind of thing, and so
We're into our second month now. Like we'll be doing this
I
forever.
know
That's how that works, right?
Yeah,
we're veterans of the podcast world now at this point.
that's right.
So thank you to everybody who is joining us on the podcast feed. Thank you to everybody who's joining us live on the YouTube video right now. If you are not watching the YouTube video right now and you want to continue watching the show, please do check out the YouTube live stream. It is a great way to get involved. I will do the minor plugs just now. This is part 1 of 40k Fight Club. Part 2 will continue on the live stream after a short break and will be available for everybody for download this week. As of next week, we will be going behind a subscriber wall. Full details on that are still yet to come. The network is finalizing details on that just now, but that will all be going available sometime in this week. What we do know is that part 2 of the show will always be available on the live stream for everybody, but it will only be available for retrospect for post listening via the subscription. So if you want to catch us without paying, come watch the live streams, get involved. It's a really good way to stick with us. Otherwise, wait for the subscriber details, and we will be more than happy to continue providing the content. For now, part 1 contains the meta breakdown and the event results for the week. And then part 2 of the show, we'll have myself, Anthony, and Nathan just bouncing off each other for half an hour about the state of the game, and then also 30 minutes of listener questions, which we take from the Patreon Discord from patreon.com/bestintabletop. That is where you can ask questions currently. That, again, we will be determining how that works with the subscriber wall next week. We will have details on that. But for now, lightning round. If you're watching the live stream just now and you want to ask a question, you can stick it in chat, or if you're in the Patreon Discord, stick it in lightning round and we will definitely answer it because we may not catch it if it's in the chat. I think that's my spiel. If I've missed anything, I'm sorry. Cool. So this week's episode is called Towering Inferno. We are running with the pun-based names. Nobody is going to stop me as long as I'm continuing to be allowed to pick the episode names, and these guys are enabling me. So we're going to keep going with it. We've had Custodes clean up, and now Towering Inferno. It's definitely a choice that we're making.
Yeah, it is as stoppable as the Custodes and Tau themselves are right now, which is not very. So,
But before we dive into that, shall we do a mini weekend review? How's your last week in 40k been? Talk about ourselves. It's our favorite thing, right?
oh man, I'm gonna go last because mine has been a ride.
Yours will segue right into our stats breakdown as well. So Nathan,
Yeah,
how's your week been?
It's been pretty good. We've gotten a lot of reviews back from the Eldar Codex, so I've been spending a lot of time just reading through it and assembling night spinners and support weapons and things. So I've got a bunch of unpainted Eldar next to me that I need to paint to go to Adepticon later this month. Although I also have to decide what it is I'm going to bring to that tournament because I have no idea at this point. Because
Have you
it's
not managed to get hold of your 9 Void Weavers yet?
no, I have a few Void Weavers, but I definitely was not planning on trying to find 9 Void Weavers when I had not had any before this. So I was like, man, do I have anything I can strip apart and reassemble into a Void Weaver? And the answer was mostly no.
This is where UK privilege comes in. I can get anything. Like, it's great.
me too. It just doesn't come out of a GW store usually.
Hmm.
out of friends' backpacks and basements.
Yeah, deep in the reservoir in the archives of models.
Well, I'll go next since we're going to leave Anthony for last. I have had a very quiet week on the 40K front. I've only played 4 games since we last recorded. I know, terrible. I know. I've mostly been playing a couple of games with my list for. I'm at a GT next weekend, the Overcharged Plasma Gaming GT, 48 player. Looking forward to that one. I am fully back on the run. I think I have like 9 GTs in the next 3 weeks, in the next 3 months.
Hell yeah.
Loving it. It's good times. My bank balance, not so much. So I've mostly just been paying for that. I have an entire side Tyranno that I have just finished spraying that I need to build and paint, that I need to completely paint tomorrow because I'm working Thursday and I leave for the event on Friday. So I've got that to do. So yeah, quiet week for me. Been digesting the Eldar Codex and trying to figure out what I'm going to play after the Nids Codex comes out because I've got a lot of stuff to paint for that. I have 18 Metal Raveners waiting to be built, hoping they're
Oh
good.
yeah.
All right, Anthony, we saved the best for last. How was Cherokee?
Oh man. So let's start with the not 40K part. I had a great time hanging out with, my teammates, Jack Harpster and and Mark Perry from the Art of War, as well as, some of my homies from when I started on Team Vindicta, and as well as Seth from the Frontline Gaming Network. Just great seeing everybody. But man, our travel could not have gotten more messed up if we tried. Basically, the goal was to leave Thursday night and be back at the latest really early Monday morning. We left Thursday night and I got home at 5 in the morning this morning. So that was an experience that involved, instead of 2 flights, 1 flight and a 16-hour drive. Some laps were sat on during drives. It was an experience. So
For my reference, a 16-hour drive in the UK gets you from broadly the top of Scotland to the bottom of England. So that's quite a ways in my frame of reference. That you could lap my
yeah.
tournament group like 8 times in that time, and you did that as part of your journey.
Yep. Yeah, that was a Monday into Tuesday part of my journey.
So what happened? Like I feel like I have to know.
The the long of the short of it was basically that we flew into Atlanta where we had planned to rent a car and they had no cars. So we had to take an Uber from Atlanta to Cherokee, which is a 3.5 hour Uber, which is an expensive Uber. After which, when we got there, there was no Uber because it's a very tiny town. So then from there, we had to beg, borrow our way through a ride with the wonderful Quentin of Threat Level Midnight. But he does a lot of stuff with Art of War. Excellent, excellent top tier lad. Really came through and saved me and the boys. So we were able to hitch a ride with them basically 3 hours out of the way to Atlanta, where we would be able to rent a car so we could drive it all the way back to New York. So yeah, that was the journey. It was not good, but
The
it did
things
get
we do
done.
for 40K sometimes astound me, don't they?
Yeah, I mean,
I
at
feel
that
like
point,
everybody who's been doing. Sorry, Anthony, please finish.
oh, yeah, that was more the things we do to get home at that point. Like we just wanted to go back to where we live. But yeah, it was ultimately all for the love of the game.
Yeah, I feel like everybody who's done tournaments for more than a couple of years, like big tournaments traveling for them,
Yeah.
has that horror story of the one time they just got completely screwed over by something. We
Yeah.
lost. We had a flight to Serbia one year where our bags didn't go to Serbia with us, and my teammate had an army in that bag that he needed for tournament the next day. So we went from Serbia to the other side that our hotel was in. The airport in Serbia is in Belgrade. Hotel's 2 hours away, and then we got a taxi back to the airport to hope our bags had showed up on the next flight, and they had. But it was like 4.5 hours in taxis back and forth to like hope that our army showed up for the ETC the next day.
Oh my
Which was
god,
just
that's
like,
wild.
Just brutal.
Yeah. Yeah, it was
it
not
turns out
good.
changing 3 times to save 50 quid is not worth it.
Not worth it. Not worth it at all.
Okay, I think we will touch on your actual games into Tau and Custodes later in the discussion because they will come up when we talk about Tau and Custodes for a long, long time.
Oh
You
yeah.
might have noticed, guys. I don't know if you've looked outside the window recently, but it's raining Tau and Custodes everywhere you go.
Yeah.
So let's jump into the meta breakdown. We had 11 GTs and a major team event this weekend. We're going to touch the team. We're not touching the team event in the main stats. That will be done separately. But let's go to Nathan for the stats hell that we live in.
So everything is fine, perfectly fine. I promise everything is great until we start breaking down numbers. So I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is that I do have stats The bad news is that all of the stats are bad. So this weekend I recorded 11 GT sized events. There was one more GT sized event that we didn't take into consideration just because there were some oddities in some of the win loss tracking data that we found in it. But for the purposes of this, there were at the top of the pack was Custodes with 29 top 10 positions. That's out of 110, 11 top four placings, and then four GT wins this weekend. So that means that they were 26.4% of the overall top 10, 25% of top fours, and had 36%. Although it's a pretty small number once you get to just like 11 GT wins, 36% or a third of overall GT wins this weekend.
And what was their meta representation? What percentage
11
of the field were they going into this?
11.9%. So you're looking at about a 2 times overrepresentation just in their top 10 and top four percentages. And
Yeah.
I won't
So
talk about it for GT wins,
for
but for top
context
10.
on people that we work with, that one, just to give a bit of background on these stats, when we say a faction's representation, we're talking about how much of the field it is. So Custodes
Mhm.
this weekend had 12% of the field, so roughly 12 in every 100 players, or just under 1 in 8 players are Custode players. And then what we compare that to is how well it's doing at the top end, which is top 10s and top 4s. So
Yep.
top 10s is, for this weekend, we had 110, and they took up 29 of that, which is almost a third, which is slightly more than two and a bit times their expected representation. And then top fours they were 25%, which is more than double. So that's what we're looking at here to say whether we think factions are good, bad, problematic, where they're sitting in the meta. When we see a faction that's doing a little bit better than average, you can kind of justify that with it was a good weekend it was a good weekend or a couple of good players played them. When a faction's doing twice as well as it should, that's when we start asking questions.
Yeah, and we'll talk a little bit more at the end of the stats section. Me and Cliff have looked at some of the data, and he's pulled up some historical data that I'll just talk about towards the end when I talk about taking all of these results and actually putting them into context of other problem armies that we've seen over ninth and some of 8th edition. So the other faction that we're really interested in, of course, is Tau. They had 19 possible top 10s, 19 top 10s, 14 top 4s, and also had 4 GT wins. The really interesting thing about this number, though, is that 19 of them were in the top 10, and then 14 of those converted into the top 4, which is just an astounding number of armies going from top 10 into top 4. Not only that, but we also had them at only 9% of the meta this weekend. So they had a 3.5 for their ratio for overrepresentation in
So
top
Tau did
10s.
roughly three and a half times as well as they should. That is
Yep.
the rough breakdown on that one that you can make. It's not a direct one-to-one comparison,
Right.
but yeah, that's not great, is it?
No, and so that's just looking at some kind of like very broad statistics. We'll also pull up some win rate data and we'll talk about some of that. And I'm sure that Anthony will talk about kind of some more of the anecdotal of like what the actual experience of playing into some of these armies is like.
Not good.
Um, yeah, that's the summary for really this whole episode is just not good. Other other
It's a
than
really difficult time to be the podcast. So when we were pitched this show by the network, it was we're going to be happy. We're going to talk about the meta in a positive light. We're going to be always putting our best foot forward. And then the first thing that happened was this meta. And do you know what, guys? I'm not going to lie. It's really hard to be the positive show on this wavelength. We're doing our best for you guys. We don't want to all be doom and gloom because there are
right.
always things you can do. But man, does it not feel like a good time to be playing not Tower Custodes.
Worry
There are
not. Our elven saviors are here to bring
But
diversity.
only half of them, right? Because the craft worlds aren't going to do anything.
I don't even know who craft worlds are. I am purely a member of the Dark City and the clown troupe that helps them out.
For
Yeah,
interesting data from this weekend, though, just to like add some silver lining, maybe a little bit. You got a lot of orc
please.
players who are doing pretty decently. They had 9 people in the top 10,
Yep.
2 in the top 4. Tyranids are still doing okay. They had 12 people go into the top 10 and 4 into the top 4 this weekend. And those are much less represented factions overall in the meta. But orcs and Tyranids doing well is kind of nice. There's some bounce back in some of the numbers that we've seen. I'm going to contextualize some of that a little bit later, looking at pulling some of the factions out so we can see how the overall field is doing and some other circumstances. We still also have Harlequins kind of doing all right. I personally am looking at running pure Harlequins in the new book. They have seen some changes since the old book, so you'll probably see some changes in how things come out into the meta. We are optimistic about Craft World's chances, I think, overall in the current meta. But I do want to see how at least 1 to 2 weeks of data kind of pan out from that.
Yeah, a big focus of the next few weeks will be how have craft worlds and harlequins, which are kind of the same army and kind of not. How do they land and change the meta? Which will be really good to start seeing events. Probably not this weekend, but the weekend after, we may start seeing a good number of detail points on that.
Yeah, so it'll be like a week from release essentially is what we'll be looking at for events starting to take in Craft Worlds. We still have some data from Tau not being taken up in our data, and it kind of skews it a little bit. So I've tried to remove those weeks when looking at just Tau
I
data.
think there's a GT this weekend as well that didn't have Tau, although I am blanking on which one it was.
I can't remember.
I'm gonna
You,
guess it's the one that doesn't have Tau in the top four, but
usually you can tell which events those are because there are no Tau players. Because prior to their new book, they were around 1 to less than 1% of the meta, and now they're about 9% of the meta, and it's grown every week.
nine
So
percent of people are bandwagoners. That's what you can take from that. At least nine, because there's
Yeah.
costed players too.
Yeah,
mhm.
plenty of them are on the Golden Boys. Those are a much quicker army to turn around than the fish folk.
Yeah,
Yep.
but yeah, they are. All right, Nathan, shall we dive into some specific statistics then? How are we
Oh,
looking on win rates?
yeah, let's start looking at some custodes numbers first. We'll draw out some fun numbers in a minute once I pull up the right sheet. So custodes, like I said, were 11.9% of the meta this weekend. They're averaging at about 12.9%. I think the cap for non-marine factions is basically 15. So they've had some weeks where they've been around 14. There have been some events where they've been around 15, but I think the hard cap on a faction outside of Marines is 15%.
Yeah, you're looking at about one in six to 1 in 7 players.
Yeah, and more common than that would be kinda just ridiculous. If custodes hit 20%, my brain would probably explode, because that would mean that they're more common than the cover the cover faction of Games Workshop's 40K game. We already talked a little bit about placements. For win rates for the weekend, we're looking at 68.4%. Overall, they're still running at about a 69.4% for all of February since their release. So they've basically consistently maintained a near 70% win rate since the inception of their new book. If you look in the data, you can see some just amazing things happen. Where that first weekend, they have like no placements and their win rate is kind of manageable. That second weekend, it just skyrockets and you see both meta participation go up and win rate go up. And then Innes is holding up a finger, so I assume he wants to ask a question or say something.
Is that with or without the mirror?
So that's without the mirror. So we're going to talk in a minute about some data where I pull out both custodes, or I pull the Tau match out of the custodes data, and I pull the custodes data out of the Tau matchup. So we're gonna really hammer home a message about these factions, and I'm not having a good day about it. For the Tau numbers, we have them 9.1% this week. They've grown week to week since their new book. 8.2% for the whole month, but that includes the first weekend where they had like nobody playing them. So they've basically gone up every week since their codex has come out. We talked about placements already, but for the weekend, they had 69.5 or basically 70% win rate for the weekend, and then a 67.3 for since their codex came out. So they're also, along with Custodes, kind of hitting that 70% maintained win rate almost, which is
Nuts.
bad. Not good. It's not great.
It's nice.
Yeah, it's real nice.
It's really nice to see that about 69% is where you start seeing that soft cap where you can't really go past it because you
Yeah,
start just playing too many games.
well, we're about to go past it. So
Yeah,
one of
I
the
know.
things that we talked about in the stats chat with Curie and also with Cliff was it's not just important to look at the context of custodes and Tau like broadly into everyone, including themselves, but removing the mirror, but also what is the actual effect of these two factions are having kind of on the meta as a whole. So the first thing that we wanted to say was like, okay, so Tau are doing really great, but how are Tau really doing into the meta if you pull all the custodes matches out of them? Since custodes are the other main faction that's doing really well currently. And so the Tau win rate into the field is 73.2%. So that means if you don't consider their matchups into custodes where they have their worst matchup essentially in the data, um, custodes win at a very nice and steady clip of 73%.
So just to confirm, when Tau and Custodes play armies that aren't themselves, so they don't play the mirror match and they don't play the other of the two armies,
Mhm.
we're looking at almost 75% win rates. So you win
Yep.
3 out of 4 games into every other faction. Can
Mhm.
I a quick check? I believe this was the first week that we saw Tau's win rate against Custodes go past 50%, right?
Yeah, so the matchup has improved steadily since the Codex's inception. So the win rate for Tau and to Custodes went from Custodes advantaged to Tau advantaged this week. So the Tau
Now,
are now advantaged in that
does
matchup.
that mean Tau's worst matchup is now the mirror?
Yes, that does mean that Tao's worst matchup is now the mirror at 50%. We'll look at some of the faction v faction data. I think what we're going to see is that once we start pulling out some of the older data, is that we're going to start seeing the same situation that we talked about last week, where Custodes had no bad matchups except into like the one or two factions. Caveat, of course, is the faction v faction data has some factions in it that have very low matchup data. It takes a really long time to gather all the data because some factions just aren't really played very often. Like Harlequins don't have a lot of players, so you have like one or two Harlequin players matching up into Custodes or Tau
And we
over
have
the
no
course
idea
of
what the win
weeks.
rate is into Adeptus Titanicus. Like it could be Adeptus Titanicus could
I
be
mean,
the
it's
saviors,
it's 100%. Let's just not lie to ourselves. Um,
but it could be different.
it could be.
Isn't though, is it?
It is
No.
not. Um, Custodes as well have a 72.5% win rate into the field. So them and Tau are basically sitting around the same point. I don't think you can really get above 75%. If you manage it, that would be impressive because that would mean that I just don't think it's possible. Maybe there's somebody who has some historical data about an 80% win faction at some point in like fifth edition or
I
something
think
like
it would
that.
be possible if one of the two didn't exist right now. I think we'd be seeing it.
That's true. Um, The other thing that I really wanted to talk about, so when I said earlier that we wanted to pull Tau and Custodes out, we also wanted to pull Tau and Custodes out of the rest of the field and see like who is would be performing well otherwise. So this is going to take me just a second while I pull up some tables. So you're going to have to wait while I pull up
Let's
tables.
myself and Anthony are just going to riff a little bit on this. Have you ever
Mhm.
seen how bad does the game have to be for a faction to have the only bad matchup be itself? Because I feel like we had that a little bit with Drakari, where the only bad matchup they had was super skew list or themselves.
Yeah, we had it in a brief window with Jakari, at least while I was playing it. I don't have much like historical data to go off, right? I started playing the game the week the Iron Hands Codex released, so to me that was like where the standard was. So I've just seen the game be crazy since I've started. So I think probably when Drakari released into a much softer meta than what Custodes and Tau wandered into. But the
Yeah,
second AdMech came out, it felt like I had a peer again, basically. A peer that was at the time I definitely thought AdMech was stronger at the upper end than Drakari. Um, Apparently Games Workshop thought so too, based on how they were both handled. Yeah, I think that was probably the last time we saw something like this. I mean, so recently, but it's definitely a weird state.
yeah.
Anecdotally from the weekend, I can tell you that like my win path was rough, and we'll go into that later, like my matchup path, but the I played 5 rounds of Warhammer, like 5 battle rounds of Warhammer for 5 of my 6 tournament rounds, and I have never done that in a large event. Normally, by turn 2, turn 3, you're like getting in there, killing some people, you have a pretty good idea what's going on. Nope. Every game was struggle, fight, brawl, grind for every point
To be
all the
fair,
way
making it to
down.
5 battlegrounds against Tau is fairly impressive. So
Oh yeah,
they don't normally let you get to the third.
we scratched it out in that one. I think that one we actually stopped on 4, but
From
yeah.
a vaguely historical perspective, the only time I can really remember this outside of so I've been playing competitively for 7th and 8th edition, so that's where my
Right.
content is coming from.
Hmm.
The only one I can really remember is Gene Stealer Cult in 8th edition, like right before Marines Codex came out. It
Mhm.
felt like their only like losing matchup was themselves and maybe some Tower builds. And that they were a problem faction and they got like put into the ground. They lost like 400 points out of their list and mechanics changes. Um, so that's the only time that I've really been like the only bad matchup this faction has is its mirror is 50%, and that's definitionally going to happen. And then everything else felt like you could at least be slightly favored.
Yeah.
So yeah, and it was like slightly favored. With Tau and Custodes, it's your 70-30 favorite into everything else.
The
It's
Custodes one's
horrifying.
just so wild to me. Like a friend of mine made top 8 this last weekend, often forgetting his dreadnought like on turn 2 to deep strike it in, and then being like, "Oh, I'll just put it somewhere on turn 3 in like an irrelevant position, just essentially
Mhm.
playing 160 points down." When he played his round 6 game into Mark Perry, he literally played 160 points down, like forgot it wholesale, and still won.
Oh no. But
Yeah, I think in part 2, when we have our discussion, I'm going to talk a little bit about balance
yeah.
philosophy and community
Right.
perception on it. That's something that I would like to get into a little bit with Anthony and Nathan and see what they think on it, because I have some
Yeah.
thoughts there. So that'll be fun. Stick around for that.
Yeah, don't go anywhere.
All
So
right,
now we're
Nathan,
going to
have
talk
we got stats? Yes,
we're going
we
to talk about meta suppression. So we're going to talk about some changes in win percentage when you remove Tau and Custodes from it. So on the whole, for last week, let's just pull out a faction. We can pull out Drukari from this, I suppose. So Drukari had a 56% win rate with Tau and Custodes in it. When you pull the Tau and Custodes data out of that, what you actually see is that Drukari have a 61.8% win rate into the field. So that's not great by any means. Drukari should not be winning 60% of their matches either, but that is a 5% shift in win rate just with two factions removed. Even there are other factions as well. So if you pull out the Adeptus or Auritus or Sisters of Battle data, so Sisters of Battle without the Custodes and Tau matchups have a 55% win rate. When you put them back into it, they have a 47.8% win rate. So essentially, what you see as you add Custodes into this is you just see this broad reduction in a lot of powerful armies by 5, 7, or even 10% downwards in their win rates just by
So
introducing
does
Tau
that
and
mean that
Custodes.
Sisters no longer have that favorable matchup into Tau that we called out last week? I have never been asked about something as much as that. I had like 6 people ask me, "What are Sisters players doing?" And the only thing I had was, I don't know. We'll keep an eye on it. So we've kept an eye on it. How is
And
it?
it doesn't exist anymore. I'm really sorry about that. That was like definitely something in the data, and then it came away from the data. I will also say that it wasn't like a super great matchup by any means, even with the win percentages
Yeah,
that
it
were
was
in
like
there.
50 something percent, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was still in the 50s, which means that that advantage is kind of tenuous. It's really closer to a coin flip in a lot of those situations.
And now it's in the dirt where it
And
belongs.
it
Sorry, Sisters
is
players. Didn't mean to give you hope.
it is now in the dirt, but you can still have a good time into the rest of the field. You still have a solid 55% win rate into the rest of the field. If you're not looking to just win, what you can definitely have a good experience at a tournament running a sisters army.
Yeah.
You may not win the event that you're going to if it's a GT or a major sized event, but you probably will still break 500.
You've got to remember that the rest of the field is like Space Marine players.
It is still mostly Space Marine players, and you still can beat up Space Marines. So if you
Everyone
really
can
are,
beat up Space Marines.
it's
What
true.
a metric where we're at, that the answer that Nathan gave to that was you can still have fun outside of that matchup. It's like, oh, good. Good to know that past that one, I still get to enjoy myself. Hell yeah, dude.
I also just want to pull something out because I just love taunting Imperial Guard players. So Imperial Guard players, this is actually not terrible news, but you have a 33% win rate when Custodes and Tau are in there. Without Custodes in there, considering all of February, excuse me while I read to Astra Militarum again into this piece. You have a 38.5% win rate when you pull out Tau and Custodes, a nice 5% higher. So you could go 2 and 3 at an event now.
You can. You won't, but you
You
can.
won't.
You
And
could.
then one of the most important things, and I think the thing that I get pinged on the most by a lot of people, like the question is always, well, how bad is this? Like, what is this compared to when we had the Ironstone triple repulsor executioner iron hands list and stuff like that? And we have a really good person who contributes to this show. That's Cliff. And so Cliff left me some notes for all of you. So we do have sustained win rates for both Tau and Custodes that are 70% or more into the field generally without considering each other. And they have more than triple the meta representation that Iron Hands ever had, even at its peak, immediately following supplement release. So it means you're seeing 3 times more Tau and Custodes lists in the tournament scene than you ever saw triple repulsor executioner
I
lists.
think triple repulsor executioner might have been more expensive to build than
Yeah, and more time consuming. And their win rates are actually greater than the initial Liquefier Dark Eldar list that came out that everybody was like very upset about. Rightly
true.
so, because Dark Technomancer Liquefier boats were absurd tools. And that
So
got nerfed very quickly,
can
relatively
I
speaking.
get the head notes on that one? Can I get so win rate for Tau outside of mirror with excluding mirrors this for the last week?
Um Excluding mirrors, excluding everybody, it's
Excluding mirrors,
7
not excluding custodes.
is 69 is 67.3% for the month,
Yep,
69.5% for the weekend,
cool. Custodes, the same. So
is
excluding mirrors, but not excluding Tau.
is 68.4% for the weekend and 69.4% since their book release at the beginning
Cool.
of February.
Dark Technomancer liquefiers.
Dark Technomancer Liquefiers was 73% across 154 games.
So smaller sample size, but
Mhm.
there was two other armies in there, and then Iron Hands. This is the one that everybody always pulls it out. How bad
Six,
was Iron Hands?
68%.
So for context, lower than both Custodes and Tau had this weekend in a
Yep.
meta where both of them exist.
Yep, and these are across everything. And honestly, I want to say that we have to consider Custodes and Tau not against each other when we're looking at these stats at this point, because it's not really the matchup into each other that we're concerned about, because we have essentially two S tier
Yep.
factions. But considering them each independently of one another, with a Custodes at a 72 and Tau Empire at a 73, puts them beyond release Dark Eldar
Yep.
numbers and beyond Iron Hand numbers.
So they are including each other about the same level as release Iron Hands right now, and not including each other, they are about the same level as Dark Technomancer Liquefiers in
Yep.
terms of win rate.
Yes,
In
which
a
we're
significantly stronger meta where Crusher Stampede and Drakari and Orc Speedwa exists, whereas Dark
Mhm.
Technomancer's launched into the Dark Angels Codex.
Yeah. And we only have 154 games with that. At this point, we have 680 games of Custodes data and 440 games of Tau Empire data. So the meta representation of Dark Eldar at release was lower than what we're seeing for Tau, and I think it hit its peak after the Liquefier nerf when we saw about 12% of the meta become Dark Eldar armies. And I know that there are 12 events this weekend, so that's where I'll end for today because I want you all to just be left on that cliff like me with the stats.
It's not good, folks.
No.
It's real bad, in fact. That part is rough.
Mhm.
So
Um,
let's go into how bad it is. But first, we do have to, put the roof over our heads or something like that. So please do remember to like and subscribe and do all the things on the YouTube feed. If you're watching the YouTube video, you can hit the like button and it really helps us out. Please leave a comment. We will do our best to reply to every single one of them. I have been pinged about that a few times already. And if you hit the subscribe button, you will see our feed and you'll see all of the other shows. There was a really great show from the Next Generation guys this weekend talking about faction loyalty. Really enjoyed that as a bandwagoner myself who loves to jump factions. Being told that there's actually reasons not to was revelatory for me. Other than that, if you are listening to the podcast, please do leave a review, like hit the like button on that, or share it. I don't really know how podcast feeds work. Uh, yeah, and tune into the live show on the YouTube channel, which is Best in Tabletop Network, if you would like to, especially if you want to continue seeing the part two going forwards. Tune into the live show; it's the best way to get the content and consume it. We've been told the YouTube videos are much better than the podcast, and if you're enjoying the podcast, just think how absolutely revelatory the YouTube feed will be. Other than that, you can subscribe to the Patreon, which is patreon.com/best in tabletop. That gets you access to the fan Discord for all of the shows. And we will be revealing details on the subscriber model for accessing part two of the show as part of the podcast. Sometime next week, the network will be revealing all, and we cannot wait to see what we are doing there. Uh, but now we're going to move on to part two of part one. I should phrase that differently, where we're going to talk about the results of the events of the weekend. We're going to go through all 11 GT size events and also the international team tournament that happened this weekend. So we are going to only be going through the top ones. We do have one shout out from one event because someone else on the network came second at it. So let's just launch right in because we have a lot of events to get through and we have about 30 minutes to cover them all. So we are going to be blazing through these. What is our first event? We're going to be going in size order because size matters, and don't let anybody else lie to you about that.
Before we go too much further, I do want to say some super awesome person in chat has pointed out that we had the Cliff's Notes for that section.
Yes,
Good
we
work.
will refer to all things that come from Cliff as Cliff's Notes from now on.
That's excellent.
Okay, let's talk Cherokee. Do you want to handle this one, Anthony? Talk about the broad strokes of the event?
Yeah, this is a pretty easy one to talk about because I was there. So this was a pretty big event. There was a bunch of us there, 170 plus players by the time all was said and done, and we were getting kicking and going. The winner was one Mr. Jack Harpster of Art of War. He's obviously a teammate of mine. His list was built tuned. If you'd like some knowledge as to how the meta looks at this point, Mr. Harpster had not played Tau at all before this event. His first game of Tau in the new book was in the first round. He had a bunch of reps with Custodes and elected to take Tau instead because he thought they were stronger. And he was right. If you look at his later round pairings, you can watch him demolish essentially a very good player in Anthony Birdsong who was playing Custodes in a matchup that did not even look okay if you look at the relative durability of Custodes compared to the output of Tau.
Yep.
So, yep,
All the streams for this are on War Games Live on YouTube, and for every single event this weekend, you can find the lists and the full details of them on Best Coast Pairings. You should be able to see a bunch of them for free, especially Cherokee, and then the rest you'll be able to access if you're a subscriber. So, shall we do Jack's list?
yes. Give me 1 second. Let me get the. Well, I mean, we should probably just hit it in broad strokes, so we're not
Yeah,
doing.
I have broad strokes. So I
Oh.
went through in broad strokes every single list for this weekend, so we don't have to dive into BCP, which will take ages because we do have a lot of events to get through this weekend. The broad strokes I have written for Jack here are: it's Tau, Farsight Enclave successors, meaning that he loses access to the double commanders but gains access to an ethereal, with 4 squads of Crisis Suits and Shadow Sun. Lots of little squads of Crew Hounds and Vespid to do scoring. The Crisis squads are mixes of direct fire and indirect fire. Just very, very aggressive list.
Yeah, I can tell you from having watched him played it that he essentially spent 1 or 2 turns putting units out before his opponent realized that they would lose if they just let him do that. So they would then expose and then get tabled. He averaged 96.5 points in his victories, which is incredible when you consider that in most games he took Knockman data, which meant that he could only score 97. So yeah, basically maxed his points every game and buzzsawed his way to a 9-0.
So rough math on that is that if he took Nachmund in 7 of his 9 games, he scored 97s in probably 5 of them.
Yep.
And maybe a couple hundreds in there if he didn't take it. That's
Yeah.
horrifying. Congratulations to Jack. Commiserations to Quinn Johnson, who was also playing Tau in the final of this tournament. Imagine making it all the way with Tau just to lose to Tau.
Yep.
Horrifying.
Yep.
Horrifying.
1, 2, and 3 were all Tau.
Yeah, this event actually had my favorite stat of the weekend, which is that of the 19 players who went 5-1 or better, 9 of them were Custodes, 6 of them were Tau, and 4 of them were other. And of the 6 Tau that that were in the top 19, 3 of them made top 4 because they just kept winning. I believe every matchup that Tau could win in the top 8, Tau won in the top 8.
Yep, correct.
I hate this game. Okay, next up we have the Broadsword Gt, which is a 5-round GT with 50 players from the wonderful nation of Ireland. And this was won by Paul Quigley, who is a ETC Team Ireland veteran, playing Borkan. So also Tau. I believe this was another Tau v Tau finals. We have a Crisis Brick, which every single one had a seal generator, which I pulled out as being specifically interesting here. A Hammerhead, 2 Skyrays, and a Storm Surge. All Borkan. So that Borkan Storm Surge getting that ignore vulnerable saves is fairly decent as a mirror breaker. Just horrifying amounts of firepower. Congratulations to Paul. Yeah, it's hard to find interesting things in these tile lists. They're shooting people off the board. We're going to pull out the interesting things when we see them. I do like that this list has Skyrays and Hammerheads. It's a lot more mechanized. I feel like that's kind of a meta call. The meta is kind of hostile to vehicles right now. I'm not sold I love that, but congratulations to Paul for making it work. feel free to chime in at any point, guys.
Yeah, I do think that's interesting. Going for mechanized is an interesting call because a lot of people are taking things like I know in my matchups the poison was super helpful into Custodes and Crusher when I played them, but it was basically useless when I played Mr. Storm Surge. So that was like a really frustrating moment when I was like, oh no, I have nothing to deal with this. You have too many vehicles.
Or
Yeah, it's an
Titanic in the
interesting
case
call.
of Storm Surges.
What'd
Actually,
you
are they
say?
vehicles now?
Yeah, they're vehicles.
They're
Because
vehicles.
They're
Wraith
Titanic
Knights didn't
vehicles.
change, but Storm Surges did. That's brilliant.
They're
Actually,
Titanic vehicles, so they have both keywords.
it's like Games Workshop's just trying to confuse us all.
Yeah,
Okay,
they do
next
that.
up we have the Kent War Games, which was another 50 player GT in England. This was 5 rounds, and it was won by Ross Law on Freebooter Speed Mob with all of the greatest hits of worked. So we had 2 Weapon Blaster Jets, we had like 3 and 3 of the good buggies, so the Megatron Scrap Jets and the Rocket Twin Buggies. A few squads of bikes, all the standard free speeders, good stuff. It's good to see that these lists can still put up results. I believe this was the event that wasn't running the new Tau book, but I'm not 100% sure on that one.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
I've
either
had
way,
to Google
congratulations,
translate a
Ross.
few events, but not this one.
It's from Ken. I would hope you didn't have to Google Translate. It is the same language.
Is it though? Is it? It is.
No, mate. No, it's not. And I'm very offended that you think it was. It's Ken. It's London. Yeah, it's good to see that the good old standard of freebooters can still be as ridiculous and impressive as it ever was.
I mean,
Nobody missed that, but
if they go first into Tau and clean up a bunch of the Crute and then they're at plus 800 to shoot, you can kill things. That stuff still dies. Like,
yeah, Tau do have this wonderful thing where if you do ever get a beat on them, they do go away if you try hard enough, which is nice because Custodes don't let you do that.
no, they don't.
Next, we have the Iron Cage, which is a 5-round GT in the US of A with 47 players. Another really cool list for this one, actually. It is Nathaniel Bjorg, and I apologize if I've butchered that, playing Custodes, but he was playing Emissaries, Emissaries Imperialis, something like that,
Yep.
with 3x5, 3 squads of 5 squads of 3 Sagittarium, 2 Achilles Dreadnoughts, and 1 squad of 3 bikes.
Yeah.
This is a
I've
cool.
played him twice.
Go on then.
Yeah, I've played him twice. I played him once at the Dallas Open before their new book. Obviously, that was ages ago, and I barely beat him by a point. And then at LVO, he went first, and he threw one of those Achilles dreadnoughts at me with the emissaries strat because they have a pregame move strat, and just butchered a Talos squad turn 1 before I could do anything. It was an uphill battle from there. He is very, very good with this book. So this makes sense that he finally picks up a event with it. Shout out to
Yeah,
Nathaniel.
emissaries is notable in that you ignore hit and wound modifiers, and you gain always strikes first on the entire army.
Yep.
It's a lot of power to put in. I'm pretty sure all of those Sagittarium have Metal Accordies as well, so they don't not hit you pretty hard in combat with 4 attack each at strength 5 AP2. Like
Yeah.
they're little gene stealers. It's
They
not that bad, is it?
another cute thing with those Sagittarium and emissaries is that they can advance and shoot both barrels and still hit you on 2s, which is rude and
Through
feels
all of your
bad when it happens
modifiers.
to you. Yeah, they just ignore every modifier, so they're just advance both barrels through a forest into an LFR against a clown. 2s.
Where were these guys when Possessed Star was running around at the end of 8th edition?
For real.
Okay, so congratulations to Nathaniel, and I'm really hoping that I didn't butcher your surname. Apologies if I did. Next up, we have the Down Under GT, which was a win for the good guys, which I feel horrified at saying, in that it was won by Christopher Wright playing a no Drazar real space raid.
Just defend every part of Anthony with a list. I personally think it's kind of neat. It's still got Talos in it. It's got a Ravager in it.
It had 13 Grotesques, 2 single Talos, and a Ravager, and no Drazar. And personally, I think that's amazing.
He knows something I don't, apparently.
He beat Tau. I believe he beat Matt Morosoli on stream in the final game by 1 point because they caught a mistake in a previous round. And Matt was an absolute gentleman and gave up the win. Matt was playing Tau, so another Tau in the finals here. So yeah, congratulations to Chris. I'm assuming you played an absolute blinder because you won an event with a real space raid with no Razar. That's incredible.
What a hero.
We're going to see you playing that now, Anthony?
Not a single chance.
Next, we have the Pecking Order GT, which was a 39-player GT in, again, the USA. This is 5 rounds and was won by Steve Trimble playing Tau. And I have written here 6 broadsides, Shadow Sun, Dark Strider, and a big burst cannon crisis squad. I believe he was running no indirect on this crisis squad because he has 6 broadsides. Do you need more? And then Shadow Sun to give it all rerolls. That is an aggressive amount of firepower. I believe burst cannons are like 6 shots each on those guys now.
Yeah.
So that squad pops out with 60 burst cannon shots with 4 rerolls to hit.
Yeah.
From Shadow Sun. It's a lot of damage.
If you want to see a lesson in burst cannon use, look at the second place list for Cherokee. Quentin brought the noise. He had something like 250 shots a turn with burst cannons in his list. It was built entirely around that gun.
Yeah, with AP boosts in the Tau book, you can also just start adding AP to a lot of those weapons.
Yeah, they peak at 3, which is
I
hilarious.
missed when they were dash. That was nice.
Yeah, yeah, they are dash. They're dash.
No, I missed when they stayed dash.
Yeah, they start at 0. It's fine, no problem at all.
It's not what fine means, Anthony.
Everything is fine.
This is our one shout out of the week as well, because we have time for our fellow network co-hosts. So Nick Olsen Johnson of Biff Pod of the Next Generation came second place with Crons. I am very willing to bet that they will be covering this on their Friday morning show. So do stick around and give that a listen. You will be able to find that on our YouTube feed or wherever podcasts are found. That's our plug. We're sticking with it. Congratulations to both Steve and Nicholas for taking down events and doing it with Necrons, man. That's power, especially after the faction focus episode. Good man.
Looking good, doing good.
My favorite named GT of the weekend. Up next, we have the Bemble Clash number 2 from Germany. Just butcher that one immediately. This was a 5-round, 36-player GT, which was won by William Furman on. Can I get a drum roll? Anybody guess? How? No, this wasn't surprising. This was Shadow Sun, a Storm Surge, a Crisis Brick, which I have written direct, which could be anything from burst cannons to cyclics to plasmas. It's damage. It's shooting you in the face. It's doing it honorably. No ridiculous indirect here. And then 3 broadsides to make sure you have the ridiculous indirect.
Mm-hmm.
Tau Sept doing a lot of work, showing up very popular. Shadow Sun is an incredible force multiplier for 150 points, who can't be shot, has good melta, and also is a chapter master. Is that good? Who could possibly tell?
I'd love it. Where do I sign?
Where do I sign up for Mastercraft rerolls and +1 to wound abilities? I don't know.
What you got to do is you got to get some blood and then sign on the dotted line, and then a devil will show up to take your order and deliver you one squad of
Okay. That's what I got to do then. I'll figure that one out.
I can work that out.
Yeah, that's probably your best bet at winning a Adepticon, Nathan.
Oh Jesus! And can I just ask a question before we keep going? How many GTs did England just decide they wanted to have a tournament weekend and not let anybody else know? Because this is like we're going to be.
Yeah, no, there was loads, and there was also a 300-player team event in England this weekend.
How do you have enough 40K players to run this many simultaneous events and a team event at the same time?
If you start the hobby there,
there's loads of us.
Yeah, if you start the
we were
hobby
just all
there,
hiding.
Yeah.
So we've got attrition in England next, I suppose.
Yep. Do you want to run us through that one, Nathan?
Sure. So we got attrition GT in England. We had another 5-rounder this time with 36 people, and then we've got James Marsden coming in with Necrons, Novak Necrons, nonetheless. So melee Crons with the Silent King back in the brick. 40 flayed ones, 3 Locust Destroyers, and 10 Warriors. This is a champion right here.
20 and a 10 of Warriors, 30 Warriors.
Oh my
what
god!
What a hero!
I think Veil of Darkness with 20 Warriors is not insignificant amount of shooting if you can get that lined up.
No, if you can get that lined up, that's good. I did watch it just get horrifically mauled at an RTT when they dropped near Deathwatch and got like 78 shotted plus 10d6 blasted off of a board on Aspect scan. But this is amazing, and I kind of want to hope that more people play this Novak list because bringing the violence with Necrons is something that's kind of cool to see.
I'm pretty sure this is what Nick was playing as well, or something very similar to it.
Yeah, something like that.
Oh no, he was playing a Scorpex list. Excuse me. Yeah, it's definitely a really cool list to see the Novak kind of not silver tide, but the silver lots of flayed ones. We have more to say about this list than all the Tau lists as well, by the way, just to show you what a cool list looks like.
The silver claw.
The silver claw, yeah. No,
Then we got
The Silent King and
Leotis.
the Silent King and the Skin Boys. That's what I'm going with.
Oh,
Silent King and the
the
Skin Boys.
Skin Boys.
Excellent. Oh,
Ugh.
Leotis GT is next. Also in England. Also a 5-rounder. 31 players. This was won by BD Hampshire. Just the fanciest of names now coming out of these England events.
That's
Winning
right.
with
I'm imagining him wearing a monocle the entire
Yeah.
tournament.
Absolutely, he did.
When I was writing these all out for a stats article, I was like, man, some of these names are great. I miss some of these. Just so fancy.
Yeah.
But not the fancy. He also brought the fanciest army, so he's got all Custodes, Golden Boy, good stuff.
You know
Or
that guy's got brass nameplates on his character on his custodes.
oh, 100%. I assume Trajan also has like a top hat and a monocle too, just modeled on him, just to make it extra fancy.
He's
Trajan's
just a
actually just a
Monopoly
3D
guy.
print of himself put on the board.
In his yeah, that's actually his Trajan model is the 3D print of himself. That's perfect. I mean, there's nothing really to say about this list. It's Emperor's Chosen. That's most of the meta. We see it a lot. It's just golden stuff for Custodes. It's fine.
Yep, 2 Achilles, 6 Pikes, and a Caladius, and
Yeah.
all the standard character suite. There is not a lot to say about it. You can kind of just fill in the blanks. It's running some form of troops and 2 or 3 characters.
Yeah, roll some
Ooh.
dice, pick some units out of the Custodes book, you'll get there.
Yeah.
As long as they're not like a Drathic Destroyer Custode Guard, like you'll be fine.
I mean, even then you might be all right.
Yeah, but you might be alright. It's not the same as you will win a GT.
It's
That's
true.
fair. That's true.
But you might still. You got good chances. And then the last one is Medhammer GT in Colombia, which is really cool. I don't think we
Ooh.
see a lot of events out of Colombia, actually.
Yeah,
That's
this
really
is the
neat.
first South American event we have covered on the podcast, which I am super happy to be doing. So yeah, 5 rounds, 28 players, which is just impressive. To be fair, we struggle to get 28 players in Scotland. If you guys can do it in Colombia, power to you. And this was won by Nicholas Francone. Thank you for having a very easy name to pronounce. I really do appreciate that. This was also Emperor's Chosen good stuff. So it is truly, and I've included this because it was in Colombia. He is running Mr. Worldwide,
Yeah, baby.
showing that guy truly can teleport anywhere.
Anywhere. He'll show up wherever, man. Wherever there's a party, he's there with it.
And this is going to sound really similar to the previous one. It's Mr. Worldwide, 6 Bikes, a Galatas, an Achilles, and a squad of 3 Alaris, which is super unusual. We're typically seeing a squad of Wardens at this point. You do lose a wound, but you gain the Feel No Pain and also Bodyguard access. Yeah, so an interesting call there, showing that the Alaris do still have some play. They have some cool stratagems. That extra wound really does help out a lot when you're playing into stuff like 3 damage from plasma rifles on tap.
Yeah, the Allies
Maybe there's a world there.
they're a super interesting unit. The blast gun on them is also really baller. Like if there's hordes ever in the meta, that unit slams.
Yeah,
hordes.
sometimes like I play against like the single Alaris, he drops down and he just randomly has 5 shots, and he's like, "Oh, I forgot about that."
Yeah, it just kills half your gene stealers. You're like, hey,
Just
hey.
drops in with 5 shots and like looks at a squad of acolytes and goes, "I rolled 3 on my guys. I'm going to kill them all now."
Unlucky, they're all dead.
Why?
Yeah, please.
Why would you do that? Why are you getting so many rerolls? You're not stood near anybody. Go away.
Yeah.
Okay, that is it for the GTs this weekend, but we now are going to go on to my favorite thing to talk about in 40k besides myself, which is a team event. This is something that will be of growing interest to Anthony as the year goes on, as he more and more has to care about team events. And while Nathan will bemoan their inability to be used in direct stats because pairings are a thing and pairings are a pain in the backside, they are something that is very close to my heart, and I am super happy to be covering the International Team Tournament, which was run in England. It was a 59 team tournament of teams of 5, so 295 players, making it comfortably the biggest tournament of the weekend.
Yeah, not close.
This was 5 rounds, and then the top 2 teams played a final round, and it was won by Team England, going by the moniker 5 Demonettes, 1 Cup. Which I'm allowed to say because I'm quoting.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, it's not strictly referencing anything lewd, so it's fine.
Now, the offensive thing here is they didn't bring any chaos lists.
Oh, that's messed up.
Because, frankly, why would you?
Yeah,
I mean,
sure,
fair.
but oh man.
All right, stop me if you hear anything even slightly original as I run through these 5 lists. We have Matt Robertson playing Leviathan Crusher Stampede with 11 Hive Guard and 2 Harpies.
11 Hive Guard is weird in Crusher.
But it's a team tournament, so you can just pair it into nothing that can deal with Hive Guard.
Never mind.
We have Josh Roberts. You'll love this one, playing a real Space Raid. with Prophets of Flesh, Blackheart, and Red Grief. 15 grotesques, 15 incubi, and then a second patrol for 3 more squads of Rax and Drazar without the Warlord trait. But you did at least have Drazar, so you're not too mad, I suppose. Red Grief is an interesting choice there. I suppose if you're just deciding you want more Rax instead of the Strife stratagems, Red Grief is better for the single succubus.
Well,
I
you
think.
also won't have Strife strat access without taking a Strife detachment, and like you kind of don't want to do that in that exact scenario.
Yeah, because you're
Um,
taking Rax, right? If you want more Rax and you're willing to take them over Strife stratagems, it makes sense to play Red Grief, right?
yeah, exactly. And the thing with Strife is it choose all your CP, and you want to use that CP on your grotesques, not your Strife stuff.
Yeah,
in
15
that
grotesques and
way.
15 incubi, they want stratagems.
Yeah.
Okay, next we have Anthony Chu playing Impassioned and Industrial Affinity, so let's ignore hit modifiers and plus 1 to hit on the first round of combat. Gene Stealer Cults with 29 Pure Strain Gene Stealers, 2 squads of 20 Neophytes with seismic cannons, 2 squads of 10 acolytes with drills, a 6 and a 4 of jackals, and 3 trucks. Very, very cool list. Very different build of Gene Stealer Cults to the Social Justifiers with their Helix, but an incredible amount of melee damage. Ignores hit modifiers with all those demo charges and all that good stuff. Big
That's
fan.
a really good build.
My always question is why drills instead of rock cutters in that situation, since you took
Because they still have
industrial
infuse.
affinity. I suppose. I mean, you just hit. I guess
You
it's
just
about the
don't
same.
tear into anything you need 3 damage into.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
Yeah, those drills destroy things when they hit on twos. Like that, being able to hit consistently with those is a
You just hit them
nightmare
and
to
auto
get.
wound. Damage 3 is cool. Damage 1 auto wounding is cool too, especially into stuff
Mhm.
like Transhuman. It gives
Yeah,
this list a real answer into stuff like Custodes, where you might not have that for the rest of the team that you love pairing into.
And
Um,
Harlequin's coming up soon.
yeah, Harlequins will hate this.
Mhm.
Just hit on 2s and then you take morals and have fun.
you just die like that. Squad connects. You just pick up your
So
crowns and call it a day.
I'm in
You
a
don't
few group
bother.
chats with Tony, and he was whinging about getting bust into Hiveguard twice and just getting rolled by them 2 times. So there's definitely downsides to this kind of list, but and Hiveguard are one of them. Okay, next up we have James Ramsey, well known for being one of the most oppressive list writers in all of 4K in the UK. A lot of the best lists you've ever hated came from Ramsey. He is a artist in the way of ruining the game. And he was running 12 crisis suits, 4 broadsides and long strike. But no Shadow Sun in Tau set, which I do think is unusual and worth calling out, just relying on the pure damage output of all those crises and broadsides. It's a 2, a 1, and a 1 with double
Yeah.
control.
Do we know if Long Strike was being
I
able to be
believe he
bodyguarded here?
was being played without bodyguard, but I'm not 100% sure. It is one of the events run by the LGT guys, so they tend to lean slightly more towards Raw, but I don't think it was being played with Long Strike. I didn't
Some
see
people
anybody complaining about it online anyway.
are of the opinion that it doesn't even really matter with long strike. You just pop him out,
No,
kill
he's good
something
enough
that's it.
without it.
You can just kill his points back pretty easily with him. As long as you're
Especially when you have pairings control and you can decide you're playing on a light board today.
exactly.
Yeah, the LGT boards are not known for being the densest boards at the best of times, and when you start taking ruins off of those, the guns
That's not
start
good.
getting real good real quick.
Mhm.
And finally, we have Mike Porter playing Emperor's Chosen. This is a slightly different Emperor's Chosen list, though, in that I have a lot of respect for it being patrol, and outrider with 3 individual palace and 9 bikes. So he really wanted those extra fast slots.
They're just so valuable in Custodes. Pallets are such a uniquely good unit in Custodes builds. Being able to, I mean, I spent some time talking about this on the weekend with some of the players at Cherokee that were playing Custodes. Being able to be like, I get Stranglehold and it doesn't cost me a 180 point unit to do it is awesome.
Yeah, it was cool because he was actually running enough troops. He was running 4 squads of troops. I believe it was 2 squads of guys, and then also 2 squads of prosecutors, which are the Sisters of Silence, just in order to get access to even more scoring to go with those palace. You pair that into a list that can't deal with palace, or can't deal with like little bitty scoring running around, and you roll over with 9 bikes. It is a very, very interesting list. And props to all the Team England guys for absolutely dumpstering a tournament. I believe they scored out of like the 3, the way the event was running, you got 10 bonus points for winning a game on top of the standard whatever points you were scoring. So they had something like 3,200 points available to them, and they scored 2,900 of them. I think is the
Woo.
rough math. Absolutely rolled the competition. which is unsurprising. They are Team England at an English team tournament. You would like to hope that that was what they would do,
They
but
should be the best there.
good to see them doing it.
100%.
That is going to call it for all of the event coverage. I believe the team that came second to that one went 4-0-1 in the main event in the main rounds, and then lost to England. I don't have their team name off the top of my head. I will quickly grab that if you guys want to just discuss the general state of events this weekend.
Yeah, it was an interesting spot. We got a ton of them in. Obviously, the results definitely weren't super duper diverse, but it's wild just to see almost at the sport, the game grow at the rate that it is, that we're getting so many events of this size or larger so often now. I feel like just like a couple weeks ago, we were like, man, there's a lot of events this weekend. And now again, man, there was a lot of events this weekend. It's definitely in a very interesting space as far as growth goes.
Yep, and quickly, the second place team was Bog Squad, which was Ethan Richard, Nicholas Eck, Francis Cowper, Jonathan Bartard, and Callum Bronson Smith, who went 4-0-1 in the main event and then lost to Team England in the finals. An admirable push for not actually a set of names that I super recognize from winning GTs and all that. So massive props to the guys.
Yeah, great work. Oh, look at this little comment we got in chat here. I can show it from the lads themselves.
That is incredible tech. Yes, we should now. Actually, we have no way to know if that's not just you posting from Art4.
I also like how Seth is in there telling them to shut their dirty mouths in
Yeah,
our
we can
YouTube
also get
chat
that
as
on
well.
screen. Hold
Yeah,
on.
please do.
Oh, there it is.
Ah, there it is.
You
You
Excellent.
should definitely
Excellent.
not be shouting out Seth. That's free advertising. He should have to pay us for that.
Look at Seth on the Mad Doc account defending Tau.
Oh,
Unbelievable, honestly.
he's just hired out, you know, a lot of money from the greater good just to hire the Mad Doc to help him out.
Yeah, we have a question here that probably Innes is pretty well qualified to answer. I'm going to use my new tech that I just found out.
Yep.
Here you go.
Crusher or Forces of the Hive might be better. I think right now Forces has a really, really rough matchup into Tau, but quite a good matchup into Custodes. And then Crusher is kind of the same, but I feel like you have a lot of ability to pressure Tau if you just go first. You can
Oh,
just
yeah.
dump damage on them with Crusher. So I like Crusher. I think there's some cool builds for Forces of the Hive Mind. Tune into Biffball the Next Generation to hear Tyler talking about that a little bit more because he's experimenting there. I believe the list is like 11 Hive Guard at the moment. So similar to what Matt Robertson was running, but with the Twisted Helix melee added.
Right.
I think Forces is probably slightly better because it's really good at scoring on top of everything, and Crusher really struggles with its third secondary. But I think both have play. I think they're both comfortably A tier factions right now. With the S tier just being Tau and Custodes. So kind of pick your poison.
I land in the camp that Forces is better if you think you're going to be smarter than most of the people you're going to be playing, but for a Crusher is probably stronger if you think you need to bludgeon someone with a brick.
And to quote Brad Chester, sometimes you just get 27-minute games with Crusher, and that is real valuable when you're playing a long haul tournament.
Yes, it is.
Getting that like 2.5 hour break is real good.
Oh, it's so nice sometimes. You go take a lay down in your hotel room, get a power nap. Strong.
So yeah, the game is in a interesting place right now, I think is fair to say.
It's precariously placed.
I
If it goes too long like this, I think we're going to be in some trouble, but I don't know that it will.
We're starting to try to track attrition rates so that we can kind of see what we're looking at for attrition in tournaments. Mostly because we are interested, like, and by we I mean the royal we of me, Curie, and Cliff, essentially at this point, are interested in whether or not we're seeing overpowered armies actually lead to decreased attendance at tournaments, and whether or not that's something that we can follow as a stat just to see if, as this continues, if we see a drop off in event participation. Right now, it doesn't seem to be affecting anything. I mean, we just saw 12 GT sized events over the weekend, but it also takes a while to plan GT sized events, and it takes time to prep an army and time to plan travel and time off. So you have to wonder when the opportunity cost for doing all that stuff gets too high to go into a meta that's kind of
Speaking
unhealthy.
anecdotally, I have a few events in April that are long haul like travel, and I'm kind of considering not going. And as a very enfranchised player, that's unusual for me to be like, I really don't feel like traveling like 8 hours to play a tournament for you. Like 2 hours is fine, but going to the other end of the country just doesn't really appeal right now. So yeah, maybe we'll see a little more of that.
More anecdotally as well, I definitely know people that have just been like, no, I'm not going to any GTs until this has changed. Or I'm not going to any even RTT level stuff. I teach a class at our local store where like people were when I started were initially very excited, but there was definitely one or two people that are like, I really like what you're doing, but I'm just not super interested in playing the game like that right now because the meta's such a mess. It's definitely a thing. Also, out of chat, no, no, it should not be. All right, that's enough for that answer.
Yeah. I think the other thing, just to touch on something a little bit, is that we definitely do want to track statistics for team events. It's just requires such a different. It's a real hard, but b we have to talk to a bunch of team people who run team type things and see what kind of statistics they'd actually be interested in.
Yeah, we should sit down and have a chat about that sometime. I think that would be interesting.
Exactly,
Yeah.
because it'd be interesting to figure out what kind of data we can pull. Because I'd love to do stats on team tournaments because I do think that format is amazing.
Yeah, we do our
Which
own internal tracking of like our games at team events, and then we do things for like pairings matrices, but they don't
Mhm.
super translate well into being viewed publicly in that they're very, very internal and very personal.
Mhm.
And they're not always super informed by actual statistics. They're a lot more gut feeling, which
Yeah.
makes it hard to track stuff like that. Yeah, team events to specifically pull out the issues with tracking team events for people who are listening, and then we were going to close out the part one of the episode. The main issue is that you have there's three main factors that go into a game of board game team event, in that you have more ability to control matchups because you're by definition picking them, so you can build lists that are very skewed and have you kind of sideline out of what is a good matchup and then turn it into a bad matchup for your opponent or vice versa. You can build like an army like knights, for example, that typically has really, really rough matchups, sometimes just becomes incredibly powerful in the team event because you just say that you're only playing against armies that can't beat knights. And that doesn't always translate super well into saying like, oh, we saw three knight players at that team event and they had an 85% win rate. What does that mean? Well, it means that knights had good pairings. That's what that means. It doesn't mean they're good into the meta. That becomes then difficult to track because, well, what if they're strong because they are strong? What if they're strong because of that? It's hard to separate that. Then you have board choice. So, for example, at most team events, you will play with a range of terrain options. So you will have generally one light board and then like maybe two medium boards and one heavy board for a four-player team, and then up to like an eight-player like WTC, you'll have like two light, like four medium, and then two very heavy boards. But they'll also differ in like whether they have dense terrain, blah blah blah, all that kind of thing. And having a list that's very good at going down as your first defender, and then saying, "I do not care what I play against. I'm playing on the board with two woods and a bit of a crater on it." That's very different to a list that says I'm going to play it into anything in the field. You can just pair onto that, and it's going to have a 50% win rate by definition because it will go first half of its games and leaf blower you off the board as Tau. And then it will still win some of the hard games as well because it will play against lists that are melee focused that can't do that in return, blah blah, all that sort of stuff, which becomes then difficult to track. And then the last one is just skill in team event. You have lists that are designed to lose games as well, and those matter, and those are very strong in formats like that. So you might have a weaker player that just gets put on a really really easy list and just said go and only lose a little bit, and that's very hard to track as well. I suppose skill discrepancy is a really bad way to say that. Yeah, you have losing lists by definition, which are also again mess with tracking statistics, and that makes it difficult.
Yeah.
Nathan, you'll have thoughts on this as well.
The most interesting thing to me for a lot of it is points differentials, because I think points differentials are the tool that would actually be most important in those things, and pulling out who you play as defender and how well they do at those moments. So you'd essentially create, and like we've done this a little bit for singles, is creating a point differential rubric where you can look at the points differentials for different factions. You'd need a lot of data to do it. Um,
Yeah, you'd probably want to have the full breakdown of what pairings were, which
yeah,
is just such a burden of tracking as well.
Yeah, in the current environment, tracking those kind of pairings is basically impossible. It would require self-reporting from all the teams that go to
Yeah.
events,
It'd
essentially.
be like really cool to be able to look at the stats and be
Mhm.
like, yeah, Disciples of Be'lakor lists are really bad at winning games, but if you look at the stats, they only lose by 10 points to town average, where every other army average is losing by 40. And then you say,
Right.
well, then they're losing 12-8, and that's really good in the context of playing into town. But team events don't generally generate enough statistics for that because definitionally you just don't have. If an army is 40% of the meta and you're playing 8-man team events, the cap is 12%, right? It can never go above that. So yeah, it's hard to track, and we will do our best to get more tracking on it. But that's kind of a if it becomes available, it is something we would love to do. But we are not holding our breath on it becoming widespread anytime soon. But we said that about regular tracking 2, 3, 4, 5 years ago, right? So watch this space.
For
Okay,
sure.
folks. Anthony, do you want to close us out on
No, I
that
was just saying.
topic?
I was just saying that one can hope it gets better over time. A lot of it is, like you said, a popularity fight of like the tools being there relative to the desire, relative to getting around the cloak and dagger stuff that goes on in the greater team's environment to hide things before the WTC. So
Yeah, if BCP had like functionality for doing pairings in the app, like you could actually track like who went down first offender, blah blah blah. But it's a lot of extra information to track. Like you would have to add like 4 or 5 layers of information gathering to that, and then also make it available to people who are accessing the data. And we already have enough problems with getting BCP data in an easy to use format that I just don't think it's feasible at the moment. All right, folks, that is going to wrap up part one. We're going to take a 5-minute break from the live stream. And if you're listening on the podcast, and we will be back with part two just then. If you are listening on the podcast feed, thank you so much for sticking with us. Part two is available now. This is the last week that part two will be available for free for everybody. After this, the only ways to access it will be getting behind our subscriber wall, which we are going to be confirming details on this week. And that will come from the Best in Tabletop Network. And Colin will have cover will be doing a big post about that sometime this week, or watching the live stream. You can watch the live stream at our YouTube feed, which is youtube.com. We are Best in Tabletop Network. You can find us there. You should be able to see a little preview for the live stream. If you are there live, you'll be able to watch part two for free. If you are not there live, it will not be available without paying. And we would love to have you all listen, because part two is the best thing we do. I think it's the best content we create. It is something very uniquely that only we can provide, because it's our perspective on the meta. So please do drop by. We would love to have you. And we also take questions there, which everybody seems to enjoy, asking us lots of questions. All right, folks, we're going to take a 5-minute break now. Thank you very much, and enjoy. And stick around in the chat, and we'll be back and we'll answer a few questions and be a little more casual. Hello, everybody, and welcome to part two of 40k Fight Club. This is episode 5, Towering Inferno. If you are just joining us for part two, please make sure you listen to part one first. It will give you a lot of context for the episode. And if you are listening to the second part, thank you very much for joining us. This is the part of the show where we talk about the general state of the meta. We bounce ideas back and forth. We talk about how we would solve things, how we're looking to solve things in our own gameplay, what we think should be changed about the game, and also some design philosophy stuff that I like to dive into because I'm a tryhard like that. And then we're going to do it into we're still calling this Not So Lightning Round. We're still taking suggestions on better names for that, because at the moment we're just riffing off of BiffPod. Not So Lightning Round, where we answer questions from the chat if we catch them, and also from the BiffPod Discord. We're going to give you about half an hour on each topic, and then we will sign off. This is the last week where this part of the episode is available for free, other than by watching the live stream. So if you watch the live streams, this will always be available to you free. Otherwise, this will only be available in retrospect by signing up for the however the network decides to deliver the subscriber parts of the show. That will be when it's available. So if you enjoyed it, that's how you can do it. That will be getting unveiled, released, debuted, told about sometime this week. We are really looking forward to that, because we love delivering you this content and we can't wait to do more of it. And that is how we get to do that. So, part two of the show. And we'll say that music's a bop, right? Because I was dancing to that and it was great.
dude, that music's so good. That guy went way too hard on that song. I don't know who he was. We just needed some transition music, bro.
Like it's not as good as our actual song intro, which I think is still incredible. But for break music, you can't pass it up.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's as good as it gets, honestly. If whoever wrote that song or like made that bit should be in charge of game balance, because they would, judging by that, would do a better job.
Yeah. So this is the part of the show where we get to be not so positive. We have to kind of put a brave face on in part one. Meta's balls, boys. This is not a good time to be playing 40k and expecting to win games.
So let's get right into it.
Let's talk about your games at Cherokee. That's probably the 2 games at Cherokee that will exemplify just how absolutely diabolical it is right now.
So I went 4-2 at Cherokee. I have not lost 2 games outside of a top 8 in an event since I played Chaos Knights in March of 2020, when I first started at my first 2 events. That was the last time I lost 2 games.
Wow,
for
Drukhari are really broken then.
yeah. Well, I played Blood Angels in between there, bro, and everyone always wants to tell me how
I will
terrible they are.
actually say
So
one thing before we dive
yeah,
deeper. That's still a 60% win rate, and that is very impressive, and you should be very proud of that. I think people
thank
forget
you.
a lot about that in that when we expect top players to have like 85, 90% win rates, that winning
Yeah,
two-thirds of your games is still really good, and that you should never delegitimize that because going forward to is very impressive.
thank you.
It still sucks to do it
So
though, doesn't it?
yeah, no, it didn't feel good at the time. I actually really feel bad for my round 5 opponent because like 4 people came up after the game after I won and they're like, "Dude, you don't look suicidal anymore." And I was like, "Come on, guys, I just finished this game,
Yeah,
please."
because you
Be
were 2-2
nice."
at one point, right? Like you must have just done some horrible things to your round 5 and 6 opponents.
Yeah, they definitely caught the hands. I think I scored like upper 90s in both. It was not, we went in there and got them.
So let's talk.
So
The Tau happened first, right?
well, my first match of the entire thing was Custodes. So my path at this event was in order: Custodes, Crusher, Tau, Custodes, Crusher, Eldari Artillery. I don't know if you've ever that last one sounds easiasier than the
It's
rest,
still
but if you play
terrifying list to play against sometimes.
yeah, if you played Drukhari before, it's rough. Like that game can be really painful, even as like a less meta thing. So yeah, so that was my path.
I
The
also have to apologize. I called the Tau pairing before it happened as
oh
well.
yeah, yeah, that was really messed up. Actually, I like looked down at my phone and I was like, oh, I just said triple storm surge. And I looked up at pairings and it was triple storm surge, and I was like, nice, dude, thanks, really, really appreciate that.
So yeah,
Um,
so how was the experience of playing against Triple Storm Surge?
It was interesting. That list is powerful. It's weird, right? So like normally when you're playing against a knights list, the thing you are typically most afraid of is their guns. Often getting shot off the board by knights feels super bad. They have some melee, but what you're afraid of there is the guns. What they've done with the Storm Surge is taken a knight, given it better guns, given it better defense, and then made it cheap enough that you could take 3 of them and staple it to a ton of scoring. So
Yeah, you get what,
that
like
said,
900 points of scoring with them?
you get 1,010 points of scoring
Are
with
they
them.
only 330? I thought they were 350.
Triple Storm Surge is 330, sir. Um, so at least I think so anyway. I'm like 99% sure. So yeah, so that was an experience for sure. Um, the player I played against was really good. I think that list actually does require a pretty firm hand. Like there's games that you'll win just by showing up and being like, haha, guns. But it's really easy to misplay the scoring angle and end the game with your 3 storm surges left in a loss. Um, Especially against savvy opponents that know how to like kill out your scoring and prevent your points. But yeah, my game plan into Tau was that I was gonna have at least one really rough turn where I lost a bunch of stuff, and then I would connect, and then I would kill them. That game plan dies horrifically when the thing you're connecting with is T8 with 22 wounds.
And
2 up,
to a
4
point
up.
armor saves. Yeah, that is not what
Yeah,
Hellions only punch. Do you want to quickly run through just broad strokes of what you were running?
yeah, so I was playing essentially just nerfed Drukhari good stuff, like the list we were seeing earlier with less things. It was a Black Heart detachment with essentially 2 Raiders and 2 Venoms with Incubi, Witches, and characters on them, because that's the only thing that went in transports. I had a court to hold my home objective, and they were heroes all weekend. They scored me tons of points. It's like the best unit for that in the game, as far as I'm concerned. They're not OBSEC, but if you get anywhere near them, they'll just annihilate you. And they take up the whole objective, so you're not stealing it that way. Um, then I had some Cult of Strife stuff, like a unit of Hellions. I had 2 units of 5 Grotesques, which were kind of bummy now that Strength 8 kind of just puts them in the dirt. You don't really get a whole lot of benefit out of being T5 and, something Strength 8 shoots you, you just die. So they did okay, but I wasn't super impressed with them broadly. Like I said in one of the Custodes games, they repeatedly failed to kill a unit of bikes, and it was extremely frustrating. Them
So
being strength 5 and not 6
broad strokes,
sucks.
what I'm hearing from that is you have Drazar and maybe another character that are good at killing storm surges, and even Drazar's not
Oh
that
yeah.
good at it. Like he's
The Grots do okay with full reroll to wound because they knock it to its invuln and they're damage 2, and they have full rerolls, but they have to get there and they're slower than a lot of the other elements, so it's a real struggle.
and Drazar's probably not one shotting a storm surge, like even on his best day.
No, the 4 up invuln really slows that down. Yeah, it was rough. I killed one Storm Surge, but I killed it by hitting it with the 9-man Incubi squad, the Archon, and Draz, and I killed it by like a save. Like he failed the last 2 saves, couldn't CP either of them, and then it died, and it was like, okay, we did it, thank God.
It's like Megaeras are always a pain in the backside for Drakari because they just get that 4-up involved in combat. They're a very difficult thing to kill, and they overwatch well, and they hit back pretty hard. Some just don't do
Right.
the hit back hard, but you get way more of them, and they all get the 4-up involved without spending resources. It is nasty.
Yeah, normally I can hit a Vect into the Majera list on the rotate, and it's not so bad. There's not really a ton to Vect into that list. They kind of just light you up, and not really a lot of it is tied to strats. I ended up Vecting the wound pass off to a drone, and that was as close to efficient as we got, and he just never did it again after that point, so it didn't matter. Yeah, that list is really difficult to play into, especially if you're not super built for it. I wasn't. I'm gonna be entirely honest. When I was planning for the event, I was like, if I play against a Knights player, I'll run around them and score. They don't have a lot of scoring assets. If they come out to score, I can kill 1 or 2 of them, and we'll go from there. And this list is not that.
Yeah.
They have tons of scoring assets, and they have 3 Knights that violently murder me.
Yeah, it broadly feels like playing against the Loyal 32 plus AdMech list that you saw. So you saw like the triple Knight Crusader, and then also the AdMech detachment and like a guard detachment or a Blood Angels detachment, where you got a lot of scoring, you got a little bit of decent punch, like you could still run some broadsides or some crisis suits or whatever alongside it, and then also get a bunch of Recruit Hounds and Breachers and Vespit and all that
Yeah,
stuff.
I mean,
it's a lot of scoring. It really is. It's very impressive. And then Borkan, just getting those invul turn off is nasty.
yeah, he did that to my Hellions. So I got to turn 1 charge with my Hellions because I thought I had to, because there was not a whole lot of other ways that I was getting damage into those boys. I proceeded to do 4 damage with 10 Hellions hitting his unit. And then he stepped back, ignored invulns, and blew them off the earth. And he honestly didn't even have to ignore invulns on them, probably. He could have just flatlined them, but he wanted to make sure he killed them with 1 Storm Surge, so he could use the others to shoot other things. So that was
too much damage output, I think, is the unfortunate problem there.
Yeah, I mean, me and him talked about it during the game. A lot of the times in that matchup, like there was times like where after the game I was like, oh, it actually wasn't that much shooting. But then I would think about it and like he would lose entire activations to like, oh, I killed it with the second gun of 5. And it just, if I was tankier, the only thing that changes is the rest of the guns fire. So yeah, it's a lot of shooting.
A lot of the way you deal with lists like that is by giving them 1 thing to kill a turn. But they also have indirect and a lot of scoring, so you can't do that because you have to be matched with objectives.
It had so much indirect. I would lose entire units out of line of sight. Like if I was visible, I was dead. If I was not visible, decent odds if I wasn't in a transport, also dead. It's a bit like that straight to jail meme. Like it's like, you wouldn't believe it. Straight to jail. It was like straight back in the box. At one point I was joking with my opponent that he was being rude, making me take stuff out of transports out of my tray just to put them back. Like, yeah, it was crazy. Like everybody died.
It is a skew list. Like just it kind of is. But when skew lists are good, they're really, really difficult for the meta to deal with. Is the unfortunate problem with that.
Yeah, like I said, the biggest issue is that you get.
Sorry, please finish your point.
Yeah, the biggest problem with it, I think, is that you get 3 Knights, like, and you get a whole, like, I'm gonna burn my curse here. You get a whole ass army in addition to that. It's wild.
If I remember correctly, we can curse as much as we want in the second half.
Oh, we can. We're just being polite.
Oh,
yeah.
The second that you take the curse cap off me, the whole thing goes downhill for me very quickly.
And it's the curse cap.
Sticking with the curse cap.
The curse cap is still on you, Innes, because we know that you're a monster deep inside.
I mean, I relate. I was, born and raised right outside New York City. Everyone curses all the time. I have to keep an eye on that.
Reminds you of that SNL bit. If you're Irish, you're just white and violent.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not Irish, but I'm pretty close on the other half.
Golden Banana Boys.
Golden Banana Boys.
Is that what we're talking?
Yeah, let's talk about your loss to Custodes. So we touched on this a little bit in the break, just to make things.
We can talk about Crusher first.
I don't want to be sad.
Oh, okay.
Innes wants you to be sad. He doesn't personally want to be sad.
This is the part where Anthony is sad.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
Crusher is a very. We'll touch on Crusher quickly. Crusher is a good list that's not broken because it has good and bad matchups and it is swingy. is strong. Hiveguard are broken. But the list itself, I don't think is not that best. It is terrible at scoring. It really is.
No, it's not that crazy. Custodes. Oh man. All right, let's do this in order that I played them in. So I played them in the first round, which had a center objective. I went first. I took, secondaries built out. I learned this weekend, actually, cute little tech for you Drakari folks out there. Take Them Alive is pretty good against Custodes, which is a secondary that no one really takes that often. I imagine.
Could you tell us what that does? I've never heard of it.
Yeah, I bet you haven't. So Take Them Alive is a Drakari secondary where if you kill anything in melee that turn, you get a point, which is pretty sweet because that's one more point than you would have gotten otherwise.
On grind
Also, yeah, that's for damn sure. You ain't getting any points for that. So the other side of it is that, more specifically into Custodes, if you kill a character, but there's some other riders there, you can kill some other stuff too. But if you kill a character that round, you get 3 points to a maximum of 4. So in a turn in which you kill a unit and a character, you get 4 points. And that is pretty good. Because no other kill secondary is going to work into Custodes if they built their list even vaguely closely to the meta lists, and both the times I played them, they had 2 characters. And I was able to score 10 on Take Them Alive both times, which is pretty good out of a secondary. So that worked out pretty well.
Yeah, because the downgrade from Hard to Stranglehold isn't that big for you, right? Like, Hard is good, but Stranglehold is fine, so...
Yes, yeah. Hurt is great, and Strangle is perfectly okay. Like, I have enough stuff that I can be like, stupid unit into the middle, trash on the sides, Stranglehold. So yeah. So the first game we played, I essentially just stayed in the corner and threw garbage out until my opponent committed real resources. Then I hit him with the kitchen sink and killed him. We traded for a bit. It was like unit out, trade, and then he committed hard and I killed everything and it was fine. That's like the broad strokes of the game. I mean, there was more intricate fight phase things that had to happen there where I would dance into a unit with Draz, dance away, go back in. Not super important in the greater scheme of things, but overall, pretty big deal. The Succubus has been great because those all weekend. Poison effects are super powerful into T5 dudes. Switching to Hypex on her was also super clutch. Her charges weren't even a question.
It's supposed to move,
yeah, it makes her move 10, so she's going 13 before the advance out of the boat. She's quick. And it's not like I really missed the 10th attack. It's okay with 9. So that was that game. The second time I played them was against certainly a bit of a newer player. He was, he's practiced a ton, so shout out to him in the short amount of time he's played. He's gotten a lot of practice in, but I definitely had to help him along with rules. Sisters do not, in fact, get karate or the Emperor's chosen buffs, so they don't ignore mortals. Stuff like that.
Quite good.
Yeah, they would be good if they did have that. That would be insane, in fact. Also, if bikes were auric weapons, that would also be pretty nuts. Anyway, so carrying on, I killed Dennis. He's dead. Lost him.
You managed to break Custodes more by saying like 2 sentences.
Yeah, some of that stuff would be pretty wild. Also, if you could heroic after consolidates, that would be pretty wild too. Anyway, so we played. He committed a bunch of infantry and some dreads into the middle. I think he just hasn't played against Drakari a ton, so he didn't quite expect the clap back when I just wiped middle.
Your list says Return of the Go Turn at the top for reference here. Like, yeah, if you didn't get that he's going to do a one big turn from that, like, there ain't no helping you, boy.
Yeah, so in the go turn, the specific go turn, I killed a unit of Wardens, Trajan. I wounded a unit of Shield Guard. I killed a bike unit and a Contemptor Dread.
And you lost
that. And that wasn't enough.
Just Custodes just get too many damn points.
Because I did that, hear me out, without recourse. I lost nothing in my own turn when I did that.
How much of that did you lose the next turn?
A ton. Almost all of it. The last thing that I really tried to do, like the end of the game, like his clapback was just nuts. Everybody just died. Shout out to the Venom 5-ups. powerful. And by powerful, I mean useless. So um, yeah, we just kind of died. I don't know. Jakari died. I expect that to happen, but we had the way things laid out. It just didn't work out well. There was a turn where Draz killed 3 bikes twice. That was fun.
Oh,
5 Grots doing 2 damage to unit of bikes, also good. 6 Hellions with full reroll to wound that was not turned off, failing to do 3 damage to a bike. Stuff like that is how you lose games. Relying on that
feels bad.
is is not ideal, but like sometimes that's what you got. We were also playing the mission where you get points if you're on the middle or kick people out of the middle. So him getting 16 points in the last turn between hold more and killing something in the middle was a big swing. I was up something like 40 points going into turn 4. And it just didn't matter. And that's pretty much the story of the game. They just have like way too much stuff and way too much CP.
Well, the reason of highlighting the issues with Custodes and Tau specifically, that's why we've had Anthony go through this again. This is not something we're going to do every week because
Right.
going through event games is super cool, but it's not really the focus of the show. But because we have had a few weeks in a row of Custodes and Tau now, it's kind of useful to really dive in on what's causing the problems for these guys. And I think
Yeah.
for Tau, it's all just too cheap. That's the biggest problem. They just get too much stuff. I think Custodes just get too many ways to trade resources with you. Like they don't have to use stuff to trade with you. Their CP are so efficient at trading that they need to lose a bit of both. That's kind of where I'm going with this one.
Yeah,
Uh,
the biggest thing, like not to hammer a homie too much, but like my buddy literally not using his dreadnought in a game that he won against Mark Perry, who is a highly talented player, is insanity. Like they could lose 200 points effectively like not use them at all
and a
and
CP
still
because he
win.
deep struck it
Yeah, and still win by a considerable margin.
against one of the better players in the USA
Yeah, is
on an army he's played hundreds of games on conservatively. Maybe
oh, Mark?
overlords.
Yeah,
Yeah,
for sure. Yeah, my buddy switched to Custodes 3 weeks ago. He was a Templars player before that point. Like it's insanity. Um, I before going into this event, I was of the opinion that Custodes could probably serve to lose like 150 points and have their stratagems go up 1 CP. At this point, I would look for them to lose like 250 to 300 points of their army. Um,
you have done a wonderful segue. I love that for you, Anthony.
I'll do my
Let's
best.
do. I'm going to posit a theory on how I think balance updates should be handled and how I don't think the community understands how balance updates should be done. And then I'd like you both to just tell me if you think I'm right or wrong. And I'm happy to consensus be wrong on this one if you guys decide. I think the community thinks that you can take a couple percentage points off an army at a time every time there's a balance update. Like you've got an army at 65%, like Ultra Kari, just take a couple percent off, not that 62, and see if the meta responds, and then do it again and do it again for three times, and that takes 9 months. My philosophy is just take them down to 45 and then buff them back up later if they didn't go far enough. Just get rid of them. If they're problematic now, they're going to be problematic at 62%. Just deal with it now. Come back later.
I think there's a super like it's not that hard to make a middle point where it's like just hit them in the head. Don't hit them in the body, hit them in the head. But like don't shoot them, if that makes
So
sense.
my philosophy on that is that it's more problematic that if you hit them in the head and they don't go down than if you just shoot them. I think if you take current Tau and you hit them in the head and they drop from a 73% win rate into everything except Custodes and themselves to a 60% win rate into everything, that's still just as bad for the game. If you drop them to 45%, at least they're gone.
Yeah, I don't want them to be gone though. I don't like when that happens. Like, I think Marines were super problematic for a while, and then a bunch of stronger armies came out. Now they're like actually useless. Like we giggle about it when we get matched into Marines. And that's kind of not
Yeah,
cool.
but I don't think the Games Workshop will. I don't think you should aim for 45%. Like you should aim for the 50, but you should aim on the weaker side of 50 when you're nerfing an army. That's my
I
philosophy.
think I think I prefer their current approach to what was their prior approach, where they would triple nerf things and put them in a grave, and then they would be useless.
See,
I
I
don't.
like that approach. I think that's the approach they have to take with the balance schedule they have, because they
I
don't
I
change
think
things for 3 months. They change things 3 months at a time with 6 months lead.
I think it's okay to do what you're saying, provided they actually buff them.
Yeah,
But I
and I would
haven't.
I would say that yes, you have to buff them back. You can't just
Yeah, I
Inquisition
haven't seen
GSC them
them.
and then not buff them back like they did with.
I haven't seen them ever do that though. They're really bad about
With
handing out buffs.
Necrons. They're trying it with Necrons.
But they never nerfed Necrons. Necrons just sucked.
No,
Yeah.
but it's the same philosophy, right? If
Yeah.
like they drop Marines and then they nerf Marines and now they're slowly buffing the back. They're buffing the wrong things, like sure, but you could hit.
I definitely
you could
preferred iterative approach in this. Like I understand like wanting to take them all the way down and then back up. I think philosophically, like that makes sense. Like you knock them all the way down. But I think if we look at GW's behavior and how often they actually buff armies back up, like I definitely think what they could have done with Drukari is they could have put two of those nerfs together and not them.
Yeah.
And like effectively gotten us to the same point that we are now, where I think a lot of people are more accepting of how Drukari are
See,
currently
I
as
think
compared to
what they
before.
should have done with Drakari is done all of the nerfs at the front and then see how it responds, and then they have 9 more months. Like if they had just nerfed Drakari, they dropped in April. If they had nerfed them that May or that June or whenever they did the first balance update for them, if they just
Right.
done it then and done everything and then not buffed them in chapter approved for some godforsaken reason, then they could have actually just looked at the codex and been like, okay, now we have time to let it settle rather than having to do what they're going to do now. Like, so if we see a nerf to Tau in the next balance update in May, okay, and they take them down a little bit, maybe they drop something off of something, they up the points a little bit, and it's not enough. Okay, well now they've got to wait a month to see that because the first 2 weeks of events won't be running it, or they'll maybe like half of them will, half of them won't, and they'll have 2 months, and then they have to do it again, but they'll only have had like 6 weeks of data,
I
and then
think
they have to decide from that, and then that happens again and again and again, and then maybe in a year they're balanced. Or you just hit them now, and then you give 3 months after that, and then you can actually say, okay, they're not performing. We can put something back in them, or we can drop drop an army for now, or chapter approved happening.
I'm gonna post a comment to the screen that we got earlier that we didn't really touch on, and I'm curious what you think.
Go for it. Do you think that if pre-nerf Ametric card Tau and Custodes were only 4 factions, the game would be balanced? No, I think Tau would destroy everything.
You think so? Do you think like pre-plane nerf, AdMech, pre-nerf, like release AdMech?
I think so. I don't think planes line up well into anything Tau do.
I think
That's fair. There were -1 damage planes for way too cheap, and Tau have a lot of.
What do rail cannons do to them? What do rail rifle broadsides do to those?
That's fair. I am very biased from this weekend, having spent a bunch of time with Jack and Quentin, who are both on like the all crisis, no broadside train. And obviously that.
But I think that list might not be the best in that. But I think that the list Tau could build for that meta is better than any list any of those factions can build. I think AdMech, Drakari, and Custodes may be fairly reasonable with each other, but I think Tau have an unparalleled ability to respond to metas, especially small metas, and I think that's why they're doing very well right now, because they can just build to be Custodes and nothing else matters, because they overpower everything else.
so.
Yeah, that's fair. They definitely blow past a lot of the other stuff. I think the liquefier boat Drakari would have been a real nightmare for Custodes.
Yeah, I think Custodes would be probably the weakest army in this meta.
Yeah.
Right.
I do want to say that I think the one thing that GW has lacked and what they seem to be bringing in now after LVO's announcement with the ITC and like top ranked players actually being brought more into some of the playtesting and feedback process. Like I agree like with the balance philosophy that now we'll see an actually more informed approach, because I don't think GW plays competitively, to be totally honest. Based on everything that I've seen from their battle reports and stuff like that, they just don't play at a high level, and bringing those high level players in, and I hate to bring in a Magic the Gathering comparison because somebody's going to yell at me about it in chat about how I'm wrong, but Magic the Gathering, Wizards of the Coast hires pro players to help balance and test their game, and they also take way more community feedback and are more rapid in their response to community feedback than GW is. And GW could definitely is making some of those steps to like do some of those things. So I think the nerfs that we see now are going to be a different quality than the nerfs that we saw previously.
And I hope you're right. I think if you did the iterative design right, like I think if we'd gone for monthly updates, we would have been in a much better position, frankly. I know monthly updates seems really fast, but if we had gone for monthly updates, I wouldn't be having this conversation because they would have the speed to react. I think we're seeing the worst case scenario for the new balance philosophy, where this book dropped like the week of the last balance update, and now we have to
Yeah.
wait until May for the next one, and that is 10
Yeah.
weeks of tournaments. Like, if we see what do we see an average of, like, between 6 and 10 tournaments a weekend? That's 60 tournaments for
That's a
like a
lot.
couple thousand players
Yeah, that's a
being
lot.
functionally ruined. I don't want to say ruined because you're still going to a tournament, having fun, all that good stuff.
Right.
It's a really bad time in the for this book to happen.
I will say more broadly, like anecdotally, the mood across the event that I was at was definitely much less excited than a lot of the other ones I've been at. Pretty much everyone was like, "Oh, fuck, Custodes again, Jesus." And I was one of those people. Like at one point, I like paired into Custodes like round 4 and then got Crusher immediately following in round 5, like it after just like that whole run. And I like put my head on the table and I was like, I am just so tired. Like, please stop. Like the meta representation of the things that are not as fun to play against is so high that it's brutal. Like, Jakari were super problematic. Even Admech, when they were at their peak, were problematic as well, obviously, but there weren't nearly as many of them. So even if you got bad touched, you got bad touched like once and you went down into the X and 1 bracket and never saw them again. That is not at all the case now. There is that thing at every single bracket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. Like, you can still have fun at an event without winning it. I think there's a different perspective if you go into an event. Like, I agree with Innes that it would be better if they could do it all at once. And it would be better if they did it all at once because then we didn't have to wait between things. I'm kind of hoping that we get a hot fix for Custodes and for Tau. Also, I just want to say to Dan Salmon's, like, a broken game is broken no matter who is complaining about it.
Yeah.
Like, Drukari players should definitely recognize, and everybody goes through these phases of grief when their army isn't good. And I definitely like went through it myself, where you definitely don't agree with the feedback that's coming to you. And I've come to realize now, as of like I've looked at more matchup data, that even if I play these factions, like the faction being broken doesn't mean that I'm a worse player, but it also means that I can still recognize when the meta is broken, even as a Drukari player.
Yeah. I mean, there's like, I don't even think Drukari are bad. Like, if Drukari existed in their current state, post nerf, without the insanity that is Custodes and Tau, be perfectly fine. I'd be happy to play them. But instead, based on the current position, I'm not.
So yeah, and I mean, Nick, you definitely can see people not succeed with armies. Like, there's always going to be a distribution of performance with an army. When you look at the data, you can see, similar to Iron Hands, that the average in mid tables is a lot higher for Custodes and for Tau than it is for some other factions. I'll pull out that data in more detail a little bit later when we've had a chance to kind of go through a little bit of it more, because we're still working on the best ways to break down performance brackets in the data and kind of look what the actual delta is between a mid and low, like, performing player in different factions.
Like, you can, like, especially with that set of pairings, Nick, for context for people that can't see, I'll throw it on the screen real quick. Like, that's all the strong stuff. He played the crazy stuff 3 times and he lost some of those games.
And I definitely agree. Like, it sucks if your faction gets nerfed into like a 35% like win rate when it was at like a 70% win rate. Like, that drastic change is really rough. Like, because this hobby's expensive. We put a lot of time into it, and tournaments are expensive, and playing competitively requires a lot of time. So it definitely is like not a good feeling when your army gets nerfed so far that you can't really play it anymore.
Let us move on to the lightning round then, shall we?
Onwards and upwards. We were talking to chat mostly while you were gone, honestly.
We
Yeah, that's
waxed
understandable.
philosophic. I can pull some questions from Discord if we would like. Which
Let's do that.
All right, so we're gonna ignore the squats question because there are no squats, and I don't want to get squatted by Big GW when they find this podcast and hear I mention squats. If
Squats are something you do at the gym, right?
yeah,
Yeah.
there
That's
are
it.
several different
All they
kinds of
are.
them. If time, money, skill, and meta were no object, what kitbash/themed army would you field? This is a question from Jason in the Discord.
Ooh.
Anthony doesn't paint his own stuff, so
I know
No.
my answer, and my answer is a full Solar Auxilia army, because those models are amazing and the best Imperial Guard models that GW has ever produced.
I would probably just run away to 30k and play exclusively the AdMech line. That stuff is woo.
Such
God,
wild.
that's
So
so
in
good looking.
8th edition, I had back when every model had a default close combat weapon. I always wanted to model all of my Gene Stealers from my Tyranid armies holding a knife in their rending claws, because they all had an extra weapon. So that was one that I've always wanted to do. I think if I was gonna like know anything, I would do a full Horde Nid army. But like, I would actually take the time to really make it different. Like, I've got my Behemoth army, which I love, but I would probably do like the full on like the Leviathan scheme with all the whites and the purples and stuff like that,
Oh, yeah.
because it just looks absolutely sick with like the triple Hierophant and the 3 Harridans and just through like the full
All
rule
of
of 3
it.
deck out everything with the
Yeah.
Leviathan stuff. I think that would look really cool, and also be like I wouldn't get told off at tournaments like by the 3 people who know what tournament schemes are.
Yeah. I'm really excited to have. I'm having clowns commissioned right now. I'm really excited for what they're gonna look like. They're black and purple with gold masks. It's gonna look real good. I'm
There
very
was
excited.
That's
one other
amazing.
army I always wanted to do. Back in 7th edition, there was a formation called the Infernal Tetrad, which basically gave you bonuses for running a demon prince from each of the gods.
Oh,
So
that's
like if you
awesome.
had like a Slanesh demon prince, a Tzeentch demon prince, a Core demon
Yeah.
prince, and a Merrill demon prince, like when you had all 4, they all got +1 toughness. When you only had 3 left, they got the +1 strength, and then they stacked, so you got all of them all the way down.
Oh,
But if you
that's
had
so
4 and they
cool.
were like toughness 7, they were all fly monster creatures. They hit really hard in combat. They were all psychers, and I wanted to do one converted as like a fallen like thing from different factions. So the
Right.
Corn one was going to be a Tau commander who would like fall into chaos and like become Corn and become all super violent with like
Right.
a massive axe and stuff like that. The Tzeentch one was like a Wraith Lord that had sprouted into bits and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I think that would be really cool. And then the
Oh,
Living
nice.
Statue Wraith army is just really cool. Like every Eldar model is a Wraith guard on a plinth.
Yeah.
Like just stood like painted, covered in vines and all that sort of stuff. I think that looked really cool as well.
Yeah.
But I will
That's
never
really
paint
dope.
another army. So
This is a really good question, and it's a more serious question, is also from Jason. How do you make sure you aren't learning a wrong lesson from a game? So like when you play, how do you make sure you're taking the right information out of it?
So am I allowed to start with a joke answer to the serious question?
Yeah, you go
I
ahead.
just never learned any lessons. Never learned anything in my life, and I'm not starting now.
Damn it, Ennis.
Can't learn the wrong lesson if you're just not learning.
Yeah, that's true, I guess.
No, Anthony, do you want to take this one first?
Yeah, my go-to is if it has anything to do with a dice, you've probably taken the wrong lesson from it, unless your answer was don't rely on dice. If you're like, well, I can't ever try and hit Custodes because they're always going to roll 4s. That's not actually true. It just feels like that sometimes, but you can't actually play like that because that's not real.
Right.
Things like that often are the thing. Also, don't beat yourself up if you went for a long shot play in a game you were losing and it didn't work out and then you lost because you were going to lose either way. You
The
might
right
as well.
play can sometimes be to bank on dice, but you should always acknowledge that you are asking the dice to bail you out.
Yep, 100%. A lot of the times there
Your
are.
plan can be roll a 9-inch charge. That if the 28% win rate is better than what you're going to get without rolling it, you should go for that play. That is objectively correct. You
Yeah,
should also not expect it to work and not be upset if it doesn't.
right.
Those are different things.
Yeah,
How
that's
I make sure I'm not taking the long lesson is to honestly reflect on games. So, actually go sit down, write out how a game that you think was tough went, and then think about what the actual fail conditions were. You have to have that kind of ability to look at your own mistakes critically, which is not something that everybody's good at, and it's not something I'm amazing at all the time. Sometimes I'll look at a game and be like, yeah, I probably should have won that. I don't know how, I don't know why. I just really feel like I deserved it. It's not really a good answer, but it does happen. It does happen sometimes.
yeah. I mean,
It's just learning and practice ultimately, and talk to people. Like people want to help you play 40k. You will have people in your local meta. You'll be in a Discord server with somebody else who wants to talk about 40k. If you tell them why you think I lost the game and they laugh at you, you probably took the wrong lesson out of that game.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just find somebody who's willing to be honest with you and be honest with them back, and that's the best thing you can have as a developing 40k player. Is somebody you can bounce ideas off of.
yeah, sign up to the Patreon and join our Discord. We'll help you.
Patreon.com/bestintabletop.
Next
Damn.
question. What are your initial hot takes on the Craft Worlds Codex and where you feel the Codex will be landing in terms of playing into the current meta? This is from Sam Lemon in our
I'm just gonna
Discord.
mute and let you guys talk for a bit.
Do you want to go first, Anthony?
I'm just gonna say real quick, shout out to Sam. He's one of my favorite people, but I'm gonna let you go first, and then I'll take after you.
I also agree that Sam is an amazing person. I think that the Craft World Codex isn't going to quite live up to the hype that everybody built up. There was like this huge tidal wave of hype building up to the Codex. I was saying that the Craft World was going to totally balance out the meta, and that's probably not what's going to happen. I think Craft World is a good book. There's the book is deep. It has a lot of options. Everything's pointed pretty appropriately. There's a lot of strength in data sheets, but everything is relatively expensive for what it does and is very delicate. Um, I personally think the book is an A tier book. I think it's going to do okay into a lot of stuff in the meta, but a lot of the ignore line of sight shooting is just going to decimate that army. Like SMS and the air bursting fragmentation projectors are just going to take that army, bend it over, and break it. But I like it. I'm gonna have a lot of fun playing light Harlequins or dark Harlequins with Drukari, and then also just playing pure craft world with aspects and stuff like that. I think the army book is a blast, and it has some amazing crusade relics in it. Like one of them is a character size Avatar of Cain sword that forces your opponent to take much worse out of action tests if they get killed by it. Like on a 1 to a 3, they fail instead of a 1. So I think the book's really neat. I don't know.
All right.
Eldar Crusade Relics. You have managed to find the confluence of the two things I care least about in 40k.
That's why I chose not to look at your face the whole time that I was talking, because I knew that I just didn't want to. I didn't want your reactions to my stuff in this. Don't.
So
The Craftworld book looks fine. It's a strong book, but it's not bullshit. That's my one. The one thing that I'm like tweak worried on is what if you just do the Orc Commandos thing of just like lining up 30 Strike Scorpions and a bunch of indirect and saying, I might go first, and then phantasming it back if you don't. That
Yep.
might be problematic, but I could also just see it being slightly too fragile and not quite enough damage output versus screens. The rest of the book, like I don't like the indirect. I think the indirect is pushed to a degree that it just shouldn't be. I don't think indirect should ever be good in any army.
Yep.
Other than that, I think the Harlequins is the issue part of that codex, not the Craftworlds part.
I
Did you guys touch on Craftworlds at all? I realize he only asked about Craftworlds, but it is kind of the same.
We
codex.
touched upon both of them a little bit, yeah.
I didn't say anything about either yet.
No, I assumed you would have.
Yeah. No, we're good.
I tuned out for a bit.
Yeah, I know. That's you're right as a elf hater. I think I'm gonna take the hottest take of the three. I think the Craft World side of the book is the weakest released of codexes, if far back as probably Dark Angels, and potentially, yeah, it is definitely, in my opinion.
Thousand Suns, really?
Yep, all the way back.
Okay,
Book
fair enough.
Codex 20 point T3 one wound model is not a good codex. I think that the no line of sight shooting is powerful, and I think that the rest of it is questionable. You have a lot of mechanics in there that look strong on the face of it. Like people are really worried about fate dice, and it's like, yeah, dude, that guy got to pass 2 saves. You made him take 72. Everybody's dead now.
It does really feel like you look at the book and there's just nothing to use fate dice on like there are in Sisters. Like they're a stronger mechanic than Miracle dice, but there's nothing. Like you can all pass Doom and then do nothing with it. That's kind of where it's at.
You can auto pass Doom, and then your like 3 core units will really hurt that one thing, and then next turn everybody will die. Their transports are more expensive than your Kari transports. Their melee options are very expensive for what they are. Melee options that are very expensive are very difficult for me to be into. Even in the lists I play now, like 19 point incubi, they kill a lot of whatever they touch, but when you're starting to touch the 20 point mark, you need to be able to survive the turn after and potentially be used more than once. And that is not a space that any of that
they
is
also
in.
Have disgusting comparison in their own codex to Harlequins.
Yeah, I mean,
it's really hard to justify any aspect warriors when troops are right there.
Yeah, I'm on that same note. People are more broadly afraid of Harlequins offensively than they need to be. Harlequins is Codex hit on threes, no rerolls at all, ever, which is not a good place to be in. Luck of the Laughing God's real tight, but I've seen. All right, so this is
It's
like
better defensively than offensively.
yeah, this is a general pet peeve of mine that I'm gonna just get out of the way now because I don't think I've ever talked about it on here before. People have this really strong tendency when a new book comes out to write 5,000 points, 6 detachment, 42 subfaction lists and be afraid of them in a way that is not realistic. Harlequins, likewise, don't get 14 luck of the laughing luck of the laughing
No,
god.
they get
three,
3
4.
2 turns of the game and 5 3 turns of the game, or they get 4 every turn.
Yeah.
Like they're going to get somewhere in the region of 20 rerolls a game.
Mhm.
Yep.
Do you know how many rerolls you get from a single captain? It's probably about 20 a game.
Yeah, if not more, depending on positional. So you're looking at, great, that one thing will be really safe that turn. But again, you are T3 dudes. You're dying.
Yep.
So the Harlequin side, I'm a little bit less worried about because they're better at mitigating that. They're much more robust defensively, but I legitimately do not. I didn't read the Craft World Codex and go, oh man, I'm going to play Craft Worlds.
That was
It just hasn't happened.
That was kind of where I was at actually too, because players are only 13 points a model, like with a sword, and then 18 points if you give them a weapon, and then they become a lot better at that point. But a part of the problem that I saw when I read the book, like I thought it feels over adjusted for the craft world side of things based on how hyped people got about a lot of stuff in it almost.
I don't even think it's
It definitely
overdone.
has
I
a
just
lot
think
of
it's
things.
probably fairly balanced, and in the current meta, that looks like weakness.
Yeah, it's true. That's
Fairly
also
balanced for
part
an
of
Eldar
it.
Codex means it's trash.
But
The
Yeah.
Eldar Codex is historically the best codexes in the game.
The other thing that I wanted to touch on is the book feels very high skill floor. So like the barrier to entry for this book
Uh-oh, he said the trigger word.
is really high.
Is that the same as what's the skill ceiling?
Oh, we're gonna do this. Not well.
How are its skill
Oh, why do
walls?
we have to do this? So it has a high skill floor in that there's a high barrier to entry, but it also has a high skill ceiling in that there's a lot of room to perform really well with the factions, I think. But I think
Does the skill carpet match the drapes?
yes, it does. In this situation, it's very high, that rugs. Oh, that carpet. Dang it, Innis. No. But
I'm sorry, I can't take that phrase seriously anymore.
Yeah,
I think Harlequins are great. Harlequins are really, 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 really good at teching to be really good against melee or shooting, and not both.
I think
Harlequins.
Go ahead, Anthony.
I am really excited about playing Dark. Dark is really cool. I think you get far enough into the anti-shooting tech with the Harlequin stuff, and you don't need to be light unless you're playing mono, but then you're in this like weird I'm never touching the fight phase army, and that sounds lame. And I don't want to do that. And I just also don't think it's very good.
I'm shocked that you wouldn't want to play the 9 Void Weaver list.
I think light is fine. I think it's not a violent list, though. It's not like a very aggressive list. It's a very board presency list, and it tries to play distances.
It's hit on threes, no rerolls all game, but you're going to get to roll all of them for the 5 turns.
Yes.
That's what it is, and that's not Anthony's style.
All right, my concern with playing light is, you remember in the Avengers when the Hulk just rocks up on Loki and windmills him around the room and slams him into the ground? I wake up in a cold sweat every night of that game I lost at Cherokee to the Custodes now. And I really see a world where that happens to light. Like Custodes just shove into you and you're like, oh, I don't have any rerolls. I missed with everything. Oh, I'm dead. Unlucky.
But that luck of the laughing god. But that luck of the laughing god, Anthony. All right, we're gonna move on to the next question, and we're gonna spend all day talking about just this.
If you had to put on your WC judge hat, do you think Craft Worlds and Harlequin should be rolled as separate armies for team selection, or the same? I think they should be rolled the same. Personally, I just don't think you should be able to take 3 elf armies in a single team. That just kind of seems excessive, given that they are the same codex and have 8 data sheets.
Yeah.
But I also don't think Custodes should be separate from Space Marines. So
I don't think Grey Knights should be
That one's a joke. That one's more of a joke than the other one.
I legitimately would be okay with Grey Knights being folded into Marines for the purposes of WTC, but I also don't play WTC, but I have opinions.
I think, actually, I will caveat this one. I think that Harlequins, the way I would split it, if I was doing the thinky think, is that you can have Drakari and either Craft Worlds or Eldar, or you can have Eldar and Drakari and Craft Worlds. So you can have the Harlequins in either of the two, but not both, and you can't have all three separately. That's how I would maybe rule it.
That would
If
make
you wanted to
me.
leave the option to have Craft Worlds and Drakari Harlequins. I know it
Yeah.
would make you excessively happy, which is why I'm not recommending it. But
And could you instead use some form of Captain Mojo and pull Thomas on and be like, hey, I have
no.
a friend that's gonna be super sad for a whole week.
So then we have.
No, you can put a Psyker in your Drakari army now, though.
Oh no.
Oh yeah, sick, dude. I want to lose Abhor the Witch.
Do you want Drukari to have
you're
Jinx
so scared
now,
of Rare
though?
Knights.
Can Drukari benefit from
No, but they
Jinx
get
from
the
the Void
CP
Guard?
generation guy. That's what they take. They just take the Senate CP generation in the elite slot.
Fair.
Yucky.
Okay, so
It's okay.
pick 2 9th edition armies that are not your preferred faction to buff that would have the greatest effect on balancing the meta. What might those buffs look like? So I think we can answer the first part without necessarily going too deep on the second part. I personally think Astra Militarum is the faction that I think would have the biggest effect, just by dint of how much ignore line of sight shooting it has in that book.
Not a 9th edition army.
Yeah, let's stick to 9th. I think this is really difficult because all of my armies are like already have 9th edition codexes or are good armies.
Right.
So like I'm going to consider that my main armies are Space Marines, Terrans, and Gene Circle, and not go off of those. Death Guard, I think, need a lot of love, and I think Death Guard being good would do a lot for the meta.
It would slow
if Death Guard
down.
had like Custodes level resilience, it would be really nice.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like they're so slow that you could give them like if you just gave Death Guard Transhuman as a stratagem, that army would be like almost twice as good.
I'll do you one
Not
better.
quite, but
you could give Death Guard Transhuman as a rule, like in the data sheet, flat, and
they'd be fine,
and it would still not be that crazy.
Yeah.
The way I would actually probably go with Death Guard is if the strength of the attack is equal to or lower than their toughness, they get 5 of him.
Yeah, that would probably help a bunch.
That's what I would do. So strength 5 for Terminators and Blade Marines, strength 4 for Poxwalkers, and then strength 8 or less for most of the vehicles. They get a 5 of Philippine. And then Mortarians goes to a 4 up. And then he might actually live a turn. That's what I do for Death Guard. The other army I would probably buff is Sisters. I would just make Valor's Heart flat AP -1. I would produce the attack of every AP of every attack that goes into the bubble. And Valor's Heart might have play. And that would be a cool thing for Sisters to be able to do without having to go pure Blood Heroes.
Yep. I would go the other way. I'd buff Necrons, but I would buff them in a way that would be probably bad for the game. I would make Necron Warriors like 8 points. And I would just be like, good luck. That would be my
Brimstone Horrors back there, 4 up and vulnerable save in 2 points.
Yeah, like at this point, Necrons have not been good yet, and I like the idea that Custodes look at them.
I think Necrons are better than people give them credit for. They won a GT this weekend, top 2 in another one. Like Necrons aren't bad. I think
those Necron players are probably really good, and that's about the most positive thing I could say about Necrons.
Fair enough.
I would bounce off of Anthony and also say Necrons, but I would say that you need to fix some of the weapon profiles on some of those vehicles. Like the lottery cannon on the Doomsday Arc is just
make that thing either damage 2d3 or 2d3 shots.
I would say
come on. 6 damage. Enough. Like stop making Necrons bad.
2d3 D3 plus 3 damage. Give us more vehicles with quantum shielding. Put quantum shielding on some funny stuff. I think.
Yeah, Nick, that's a good point. I would drop Orc Boys by a point, I think, at this point.
Orcs need love on the... Man, they need some of their Horde rules back.
I know what I'd do with Orcs. I would give you a 2-point discount per model if you run 30-man squads, but only if you run 30-mans.
I like that. Maybe
so Sigmar did that in 2nd edition, where if you ran full-size squads, you got a small discount. I'd do the same thing for Demon 30-man blocks. If you run a full squad, you get a medium-sized discount. So Orc Boys, they're like 9 points a model just now. But if you run 30s, they're 8 points. Whatever. Who cares? So if you run a full squad, you don't get it on MSU, but you run full squads, you get the buff.
Yeah, there's so much volume in the game right now that you could make Orc Boys pretty like ludicrously cheap. Like you could make them like 8 points, 7 points.
I think 8 points would be fine. I think 7 gets to the point where you're like some armies like Gene Circle and that just don't have the capacity to deal with that. And I don't think
sure?
That's necessarily.
I feel like unit of 10 men, Gene Circle goes into 2 squads, just kills most of them, and then you're just like,
no,
all right.
not a toughness 5, Anthony. You have to remove the toughness 5 now.
That's fair. They don't have an invul. They just die. Like you pass wound, dead model. Like
Yeah, I know, but they do the same thing back with more attacks and cheaper. So,
So we go to the next question.
but yeah,
Oh.
I think Orc Boys. Let's move. Yeah, let's jump on because there's so many armies you could balance in like very.
Let's
easy way
not
very
take the
quickly.
bonus super cynical question because I don't think it's as interesting.
Well, I will handle it quickly. You could make any Marines army good right now.
Yep.
Yeah, it's
Oh
true.
yeah, and
You would sell a lot
through
of
the
models.
There you go.
Yep.
If you want to make an army good quickly, make Marines good. Make
Yep.
like 3 Marine supplements that all have wildly different builds. Make a melee build good, make a shooting build good, and make a vehicle build good, and you would sell so many more Marines instead of none that they're selling at the moment.
I mean,
For
just
current
their
knowledge, I'm sure casuals are buying loads. But
just their V2 with like white scars and fists and iron hands. Boom, did it.
That would do it.
Yeah.
Having now played a number of games with new missions, what are your thoughts? How do they change the meta and list building?
Oh my god, do I have thoughts on this one now? Okay, so full disclosure.
go on, coach mode.
Yeah, so do I would obviously with everything that happened after LVO, picking up this show, joining Art of War, et cetera, I did not have a lot of time to play the new missions before I went to Cherokee. One thing that I absolutely learned and felt very hard at Cherokee is that an old playstyle of mine, which was hold 2 for most of the game, get a 15, score 45 on primary, is flat dead. You cannot do that anymore. It not even like it doesn't not work anymore. It doesn't even almost work anymore. My wins were lower scoring than they usually are by like an order of magnitude. My losses were rough. You have to have some form of plan to hold those primaries and perform those tertiaries. I like even going
You
into
have to
the
play around the tertiary. That is the biggest thing that changed. Your
yeah,
game
it's
plan, even
like
more so than having like a secondary like direct assault, you play around the tertiary now. It's very important. It's almost half of your primary.
yeah, it's
in
a
most games.
huge deal. Being able to turn the corner and score like 16 twice on the last 2 turns is like backbreaking in half these missions. You can be winning all game and just lose at the end by like a pretty considerable margin if you're not careful. Yeah, that
And
was
I
my
think
biggest
secondaries are hard to
takeaway.
score now. That's the other biggest thing is secondaries are just harder now.
Yeah,
You don't get mission secondaries. You can't like Marines can't take 2 secondaries. A few of them got harder, like Engage and Nachmund are both just harder now.
yep.
So yeah, you score less points. You have to have more plans to interact with your opponents.
How
We were like just to quickly segue. The WTC was testing a 70-point differential to get a 20-0, and we saw the new missions and we jumped back down to 50 because winning by 70 is just not possible.
I don't
Without
even
completely.
yeah, you would have to there would have to be a skill mismatch that I can't even
You like
fathom
have to be
happening.
playing Crusher and go first. Like Crusher going first can do it, and like Drakari into bad matchups, like you can do it, but it's really hard to keep your opponent down 70 points.
Yeah, I feel like at the national level, even with good pairings on a bad table, it's very unlikely for there to be that disparaged of a mismatch, but that might be my own inexperience talking.
It depends. Sometimes those games are just blowouts.
how would
Yeah.
you rate the new rule set though? I personally like it, but I'm curious what you two think about it.
I think the old ones were like a 6 out of 10 for me, and the new ones are like a 7. Like, I don't love them. I don't like that there are primary things that incentivize killing directly, and I think a few of them centralized. They centralize too much on the midboard. You are
Yeah.
far too heavily incentivized for playing the midfield at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of my biggest issue with it is that yeah, there's a mission where you get a point for every unit you kill, up to 3 a turn, which is just ridiculous because the number of units armies play are so widely different in this game.
Yep.
And yeah, the fact that there's 6.5 objectives, 6.5 maps with a central objective, up from 3 in the previous pack,
Yep.
is horrible because it
Mhm.
was already games returning at the scrums at the center, and now they just are that. That is the game at the moment.
Okay.
Yeah, I pretty much agree with Innes, but with the scores flipped. I liked the older missions slightly more than the newer ones, but that's
That's reasonable.
I like
I'm just glad like scouring and that are gone. Like
yeah.
there are
I mean,
there are
Scouring's still there.
I
It's just
think
got a better deployment.
sorry. I think the average like this pack is almost all the missions are like 6s to 8s. The
Right.
previous pack had a few like 9s and a few 3s,
Yeah.
and now it's a lot more normalized. So if you were just cherry picking the best missions from the previous pack, like if all you were doing was playing Vital
Right.
Intelligence and Battle Lines and a couple other ones, and you were not playing Scouring or Overrun, oh my god, Overrun. You were gonna have you had a better pack of 5. I think the pack of 9 is much better.
These 2 comments, I'm gonna put them on the screen real quick. Actually, like kind of hit the nail. Oh, I'll do them one at a time a little bit slower. This
Mm-hmm.
Yep, agreed with
is-
Nick. Don't like primary bonus to center. We need to say these out loud for.
Yeah, I was
podcast.
just gonna say we should.
I don't like the primary bonus center around killing, at least not with Tau and Custodes as they are. I agree. I think it's only a couple of the missions.
It's like 1 or 2
like
of
the
them.
one where you get points for killing the people in the center. And
Oh,
the
I
one where
know.
you, but you also get that for taking the center, right? So
Yeah, if you
like you can
hold
get
the
it,
center at the end
you
of your
get
turn,
2 and you get
3.
1 bonus
Yeah.
killing as
Yeah.
well. And then there's the one where it's just you get extra grind them down. That's the one I really take umbrage with.
Yeah.
I think this is a fully well developed point from Nick.
That's the same thing, basically, just with different wording. I just wanted to highlight.
Mid board bull definitely exacerbates the custodes issue.
Yep.
Yeah, it does. And if Marines were good right now, I think we would have a real problem because Marines are real good at playing the center board.
Yeah. Especially with
which
investigate sites as it is.
Kind of nice that Marines kind of suck right now. Because right now, Black Embers were like really strong right now, and you just had to play against Oath of Moment, Investigate Signals, and Stranglehold every game.
Yeah. And I don't even think that like you'll score a ton of points with that as Marines. It just might not feel good as your dudes get blasted by stronger armies, but you'll score on the way down.
Yeah.
The bomb mission is absolute mayhem. The bomb mission is great because you forget to plant bombs till turn 4 and then have to figure out how to defuse the one your opponent planted. That's that mission for me.
Oh, that mission.
And then I lose games on 4-up rolls. I hate it.
Yeah, that mission makes me upset. I don't want to talk about that mission. That mission's like my least favorite in the pack.
I do think I like the idea of some of those primaries, but I don't think all of them are good, and I think the quality is uneven again. There's also that one mission where you can't use any of your pre-deploy moves or special rules, and that's just kind of silly.
It's so stupid.
Yeah, I like it in theory, but I don't like it in Dawn of War.
Mhm.
Like if you use that in a search and destroy mission, like conversion or death and zeal, I think that would be a lot more interesting. But in Dawn of War, it kind of doesn't make sense. But if you couldn't pregame move in the mission where you start like 13 inches apart, I think that would be fine. I think you could probably just put that in both of those missions and be okay with that.
Yeah, sure. That would make a ton of sense. I don't like it as it is in the current one, especially as someone that played Blood Angel. Sometimes you just cut my Death Company's legs off. It's like super annoying.
It is really, really nice to have that 1 in 9 that you play Tau in that one and get a game though. So
Just use the forward deploy.
Which deployment?
I play Tyranids, man. We don't have forward deploy.
Find some.
Which deployment arrangement is Death and Zeal? Because some of these names predate my joining 40K.
Death and Zeal and Conversion are the sweep and clear style
Okay.
deployment where you have like the table cores.
Okay. Sometimes people talk about like hammer and anvil deployments and stuff like that, and I get just like
I know.
so
It's
confused.
just ingrained habit at this point. It's like calling reserve mechanics deep strike and outflank. You're never going to get rid of it.
Yep.
Okay, we have 2 more questions. We're going to blitz through these ones super quick because it is getting late, and we are running the network out of money because we're making them put more content online. This is the things we do for love. Is there too much psychic defense in the game? I flirted with Thousand Suns and having to deal with sisters, then Black Temples and their custodes. Much less every army seemingly have a 4-up deny. It makes them frustrating to wield the core mechanic. Yeah, I think there is.
Yep.
I think psychic defense. It's one of those things where it feels bad if you don't have any, but then they gave all the armies that don't have any way too much, and now the worst psychic defense is having a psyker.
Yeah.
So
you know who has no psychic defense and takes it on the chin? Drakari, but it was fine.
you know who
just
doesn't care?
Yep.
Yeah. I don't think you need psychic defense to be a strong army.
I think it's fine without it, and I agree that the psychic phase should be more threatening than it is. It's actually really annoying that the best Custodes faction just ignores it.
Yeah, the only army that has a psychic phase that feels like a psychic phase is Thousand Suns, and it's very complicated. I think the psychic phase has been tuned down to the point where buffs that you get in the psychic phase are just worse than command phase buffs that most armies have.
Yep.
The AdMech command phase is stronger than any psychic phase in the game.
Yeah. Oh, that's not close.
Yeah, I think there are too many.
Except Thousand Suns. Thousand Suns genuinely do have a psychic phase. I don't think that's unfair.
Yeah, the 4-up shrug on Emperor's Chosen is one of the reasons why that faction is so unbalanced.
I think all the 4-up deny stratagems are egregious and shouldn't exist as well. Personally,
They should be 5-ups if anything. I think they could.
I would just make it you give the character the ability to roll to deny the witch.
That would work too.
Or just give the unit the ability. Yeah, you get to take a deny the witch test. You don't just get to 4-up no
That's
sale.
fair.
Yeah, you have a mechanic in the game for psychic defense. Please use it.
Like I think stuff like Watch from Dark Ages is a really cool version of psychic defense, where it's a once per game auto deny with unlimited range. But it's once per game, and you deal with it. If all those stratagems were once per game, maybe there'd be more merit to it.
Sure. Yeah.
Like you get to pick one. But like Sisters is just so stupid. Like every unit just 6-up deny, and
Or
then also
5-up
deny strat. They can use on top of that, and they have a 5-up deny off a litany. Yeah, and then they could run a Psyker on top of that if they want to with like an Inquisitor.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then from Chris, now that the Nachman missions have been released for a while, do you have data on which ones have been lending themselves to bigger wins and which ones lead to closer fought games? I don't think
We
so.
do
We're
not.
still very new on these missions.
Yeah.
That is something that Goonhammer will probably be tracking when they do their state of the meta sometime in the next month or so.
Yep.
Which they typically do once a quarter, and that will be a thing to look out for there. And when that does drop, we will shout that out on the show because that'll be a really good thing that fits very well with our modus operandi.
We are working on it also to collect data for the different missions. The challenge is that BCP doesn't ask for it to be reported. And so it would require us going into the packet for each event, pulling out that information. But if they even have a packet available online, pulling out the
We
missions.
can do it with ITC Battles app
Yeah.
data, but for GT stuff, it's difficult. And the ITC Battles app data is very unsanitized. It is just people playing games.
Yeah.
I've been making the effort to get all my games recorded because it helps people, but it is limited in scope.
Tell all your TOs to require everything to be filled out and make them ask BCP to require more information from them. Is my request. I get that it's not. I get it's not fun for a lot of people that need to put more information in, but it is very helpful if you want to see a better game balance state because it's more data that we can collect to look at.
Right.
So let's do the last thing. What do we have coming up next week? I personally am at a GT. I'm at the Overcharged Plasma Gaming. I'm playing Crusher Stampede because I hate myself and want to lose 2 games. What about yourselves? Anything coming up this weekend?
I am hyped. I am ready to play a new army. I have not touched clowns since I started. I wanted to start on them, but I was, as a young 40k player, convinced myself that I was not anywhere near the caliber needed to pilot them to a way that would be fun for me. I am now definitely got that under my belt, and I am ready.
I think that's fairly reasonable.
Yeah, I hope so. I can at least pilot them, let alone do it well. Yeah, I'm ready for nonsense. I'm ready to have really good stratagems. I'm super excited about having a redeploy strat. I am very...
You could have been playing Poison Tongue.
Yeah, gross. I'm very, very, very excited to play 600 points of Drakari and 1,400 points of Harlequins and call myself a Drakari army in BCP. It is going to be...
You fit in all 1,400 points of Harlequins in a single patrol.
Yes.
I'm so proud of you.
Thank you. I do my best.
Yeah. Well, I do with my Iron Hands. It's like everything's in a Vanguard. It's okay.
Yeah,
Don't worry about it.
Get out of here. Don't worry about it. It's fine. We use the slots we got. We got 500 points of bikes in this thing. So I'm super, super, super excited to play that this week. I'm going to play it early and often as much as I can. From now, probably until my next event, which is in a couple weeks at Mythicos, the Leprechaun GT.
Nice.
It's a unique 40k event. It's got cash prizes. So
that is cool.
Yeah, that'll be cool. So,
but it is the Leprechaun GT, so watch it doesn't like vanish into thin air afterwards.
That would be a real shame. But yeah, I cannot express how, like, we had the dark times over the weekend where we got beat up by some dude playing for 3 months. It is now time for violence and vengeance.
I'm just hoping Nid leaks start this week.
Oh boy, those Nid leaks that we got already are so good.
Yeah, I've been rolling my Swarm with his 6 attacks. I'm like, just wait a week, brother.
Yeah. Three more.
It's all going to change.
3 more, Hoss.
Plus the tail. Tail might be good now. Tail might have HP now.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay. I've been forgetting my DVK on tail for like 3 months. Oh my god, I keep forgetting that thing. It's just 7 EP3, 2 damage attack.
Trolling.
To roll it.
Oh, I did lose 6 witches this weekend to the Demacaron eating them. Like he rolled the 6 and just ate them. I was like, ah!
Love it. Okay, everybody, thank you very much for sticking it out for the end of part 2. Apologies for the tech issues that I had in the middle there, and thank you very much to everybody for sticking around for the live stream. If you're listening to the podcast, please do remember that the live stream exists, and if you want to keep listening to part 2 of the podcast, which I do think is our best work, you can do that in 2 ways. One is you can become a subscriber to the show. We are going to be releasing details on exactly how to do that sometime this week, so keep an eye on the network for that. You should be able to see that on all our social media. We will be touting it high and from the heavens. Or you can watch the live stream for free, same time every week. That is 12 a.m. GMT, UK time, 12 a.m. on Wednesday morning, Tuesday night. And I believe it was 5 p.m., 6 p.m. for you guys?
7 p.m. Eastern, 6 for Mr. Nathan.
7 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m.
Central Standard.
Central? There we go. I don't know American time zones. I really apologize.
You did it.
You can catch us live and free. We will be here every week. The VODs will not be available after that. It will only be available by podcast. So you'll get part 1 for everybody, part 2 for subscribers, and live stream viewers because we do so love a live stream. thank you everybody for being with us this week. It has been a pleasure as always. This has been episode 5, Towering Inferno, and we will catch you next week.
Goodbye.